The late-night glow of Elon Musk's phone screen cast faint shadows across his bedroom. He was scrolling through Twitter, his usual routine after wrapping up a day of managing Tesla, SpaceX, and the myriad of other projects demanding his attention. It was the tweet's caption that first caught his eye. 11-year-old claims he can make humans immortal. Scientists are shocked. The tweet was accompanied by a grainy video clip of a boy standing in a small, cluttered room. Julian Carter's voice was calm yet confident, his piercing blue eyes locked onto the camera. I've developed a theoretical model that manipulates cellular decay. If applied correctly, it could make human aging reversible, Julian declared, standing in front of a whiteboard filled with equations so complex they seemed incomprehensible even to Elon at first glance. The video cut to footage of Julian solving a physics problem in seconds, one that a renowned professor had struggled with for months. The boy then turned to the camera and said with disarming honesty, "This isn't about playing God. It's about saving humanity from time itself." Elon leaned forward, intrigued. He had seen his fair share of child prodigies over the years, but there was something different about this one. Julian wasn't just a boy with raw intelligence. He had audacity, a certain gravity in his voice that belied his age. Curiosity turned into fascination as Elon read through the comments under the tweet. Some hailed Julian as a modern-day Einstein, while others dismissed him as just another internet hoax. Yet, buried beneath the cynicism and fanfare was one undeniable truth. This boy had managed to grab the world's attention. Elon's fingers hovered over his keyboard. He hesitated, then opened a direct message to the person who had posted the video. "Do you know how I can contact Julian Carter?" Elon. He hit send, half expecting to be ignored. But within minutes, his phone buzzed with a reply. "Julian doesn't have social media, but his mother manages his emails. Here's the address." Elon stared at the email address, his heart racing slightly. Sending a message felt impulsive, but something about Julian's determination reminded him of his younger self. Relentless, unorthodox, and willing to challenge the impossible. He began typing. The next morning, across the country in a modest suburban home, Julian Carter was perched on a stool in his makeshift lab, a converted garage that smelled faintly of soldering wires and old books. His world was contained within these four walls. A cluttered desk, shelves overflowing with scientific journals, and a second-hand computer humming softly in the corner. He didn't hear the knock at first. His focus was locked on the glowing screen in front of him, where lines of code scrolled endlessly. It wasn't until the knock grew louder, insistent, that he sighed and yelled, "Mom! Someone's at the door." His mother's voice came from the kitchen. "I'm busy, Julian. Can you answer it?" Julian groaned but complied, pushing open the heavy garage door to find a tall man in a dark blazer and jeans standing on the front porch. It took Julian a moment to recognize him. "Elon Musk?" Elon smiled. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." For a moment, Julian was too stunned to speak. The man standing in front of him wasn't just a billionaire or a celebrity. He was an icon, a symbol of innovation and ambition. And now he was here, on Julian's doorstep, as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Julian finally found his voice. No. I mean, yes. I mean, come in." Elon stepped inside, taking in the modest furnishings and the faint smell of coffee lingering in the air. Julian led him to the garage, where Elon's gaze immediately fell on the chaos of books, tools, and half-built contraptions. "This is impressive," Elon said, gesturing to a model of a DNA strand suspended in the air, held together by wires and magnets. "It's a work in progress," Julian said, brushing off the compliment. Elon turned to him, his expression serious. "I saw your video. If what you're claiming is true, it's groundbreaking. But I need to know, are you serious about this, or is it just a thought experiment?" Julian straightened, meeting Elon's gaze with unwavering confidence. "It's more than a theory. I've run simulations, and the math checks out. I can show you." Elon raised an eyebrow. "Simulations are one thing. Real-world application is another." Julian's lips tightened. "That's why I need help. I don't have the resources to build a functional prototype, but you do." The words hung in the air, daring Elon to respond. He was used to being the one who pushed boundaries, who challenged others to think bigger. Now, this 11-year-old was challenging him. After a long pause, Elon finally nodded. "All right, Julian, show me what you've got." That evening, as Elon left the Carter residence, his mind buzzed with possibilities. Julian's ideas were bold, almost reckless, but they were rooted in undeniable brilliance. If there was even a sliver of truth to what the boy claimed, it could change the course of human history. Before driving off, Elon glanced back at the garage, where Julian was already back at work, hunched over his computer. It was clear that this boy wasn't just chasing a dream. He was chasing destiny, and Elon Musk was about to become part of it. The following day, Elon Musk sat in his office at SpaceX, reviewing the pile of notes and data Julian had shared with him. Equations, schematics, and dense algorithms covered the pages. Each one spoke to the boy's intelligence, but what struck Elon more was Julian's creativity. Theories about cellular regeneration were nothing new, but Julian's approach, utilizing quantum fields to stabilize cellular decay, was entirely original. Elon leaned back in his chair, gazing out the window at the distant Falcon Heavy rocket waiting on the launch pad. He couldn't shake the feeling that Julian was more than just another prodigy. This boy had the potential to solve problems that humanity hadn't even fully articulated yet. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Julian's mother, Susan Carter. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with Julian yesterday. He hasn't stopped talking about it. Let us know if you'd like to visit again." Elon smiled. It was rare to meet someone so young yet so relentless. He quickly replied, "I'd like to learn more about him and his work. Would it be okay to visit again tomorrow?" The response came almost immediately. "Absolutely. Julian would love that." The next day, Elon arrived at the Carter's house again, but this time, he came prepared. He brought a small team of his top engineers and a stack of non-disclosure agreements. If Julian was serious about his theories, Elon wanted to ensure that his work was protected. Susan greeted them at the door. She was in her early 40s, with soft brown eyes and an air of quiet strength. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this," she admitted as she led them into the house. "Julian's always been different, but now it feels like the whole world is paying attention." Elon nodded. "It's a lot for a kid to handle, but he seems grounded. You've done a good job raising him." Susan smiled, though her eyes hinted at the sacrifices she had made to support her son's brilliance. In the garage, Julian was waiting, bouncing on the balls of his feet with nervous energy. His excitement was palpable as he greeted Elon and the engineers. "I've been working on a new version of the model," he said, leading them to his computer. "I think I've found a way to reduce the energy input by 20% without compromising the system's stability." Elon's chief engineer, Marissa, leaned in to examine the screen. She frowned, then looked at Julian with genuine surprise. "This is actually feasible. Where did you learn this?" Julian shrugged. "I read a lot." Elon chuckled. "You've got more than book smarts, Julian. You're thinking outside the box in ways most people can't." For the next several hours, Julian walked the team through his theories and experiments. Though he occasionally stumbled over technical jargon, his understanding of the concepts was undeniable. Even Marissa, who rarely handed out compliments, seemed impressed. But as the day wore on, Elon noticed something else about Julian, something beyond his intellect. Whenever the conversation veered into the implications of his work, Julian's tone grew somber. "This isn't just about living forever," he said at one point, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about giving people more time to be with their families, to pursue their dreams, to fix their mistakes." The room fell silent. It was a sentiment so profoundly human that it was easy to forget it was coming from an 11-year-old. Later that evening, as the team packed up to leave, Elon lingered in the garage. He found Julian sitting alone, scribbling equations in a notebook. "Do you ever take a break?" Elon asked, sitting down beside him. Julian looked up and smiled sheepishly. "Not really. There's too much to do." Elon studied him for a moment. "You remind me of myself at your age. Always chasing the next big idea, always trying to prove something. But you should know, it's okay to slow down sometimes." Julian hesitated, then said, What if I don't have time to slow down? The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Elon could see the weight Julian was carrying. The pressure to succeed, the fear of failure, and the unspoken worry that his time might run out before he could make a difference. You've got time, Julian, Elon said gently. And now you've got help. Julian's eyes met Elon's, and for the first time, his guarded expression softened. As Elon drove home that night, his mind raced. Julian's vision was ambitious, but it wasn't impossible. If they could refine his theories and develop a prototype, it could revolutionize medicine, biology, and even space exploration. But Elon also knew the risks. Pushing the boundaries of science often came with unforeseen consequences. And Julian, for all his brilliance, was still a child. A child who might not fully understand the doors he was about to open. Still, one thought kept repeating in Elon's mind. What if he's right? The following morning, Elon Musk sat in his office, staring at Julian's notes spread across his desk. He hadn't slept much the night before. His mind was racing with possibilities and concerns. Julian's theories about halting cellular decay were revolutionary, but Elon couldn't ignore the ethical dilemmas and practical challenges they posed. A knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. It was Marissa, his chief engineer, holding a tablet. We've been running simulations based on Julian's equations, she said, handing Elon the device. The numbers are startling. If his theories are correct, we could see early results within a few months. But there's a catch. Elon raised an eyebrow. Go on. Marissa hesitated. Scaling this technology is going to require massive resources, money, specialized equipment, and test subjects. And there's another issue. Regulatory approval. Governments aren't going to let an 11-year-old lead a project on human immortality without scrutiny. Elon leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. What do you think? Is it worth pursuing? Marissa's expression softened. I think Julian's onto something groundbreaking. But it's a long road, and there are risks, both scientific and personal. He's just a kid, Elon. Are we ready to put that kind of pressure on him? That afternoon, Elon decided to visit Julian again. But this time he wanted to see more than just his work. He wanted to understand the boy behind the genius. When Elon arrived at the Carters' modest home, Susan greeted him warmly. Julian's in the backyard, she said, leading him through the house. He's been working on something new all morning. Elon stepped outside to find Julian sitting on the grass, tinkering with a small robotic device. It looked like a mechanical spider, its legs made from repurposed wires and gears. What's that? Elon asked, crouching down beside him. Julian looked up, his face lighting up with excitement. It's a self-repairing drone. I'm trying to build something that can fix itself if it gets damaged. It's still a work in progress. Elon smiled. Impressive. But tell me something. Why do you do all this? What drives you? Julian hesitated, his hands stilling on the drone. For a moment, he looked much younger, his confidence giving way to vulnerability. My dad passed away when I was 6, he said quietly. It was cancer. The doctors said there was nothing they could do. I remember sitting by his hospital bed, wishing I could fix him, like I fix my machines. But I couldn't. Elon felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry, Julian. That's a lot for anyone to go through, let alone a child. Julian nodded, his gaze distant. That's why I want to make humans immortal. Not because I'm afraid of dying, but because I don't want anyone else to lose the people they love. Elon was struck by the depth of Julian's conviction. This wasn't just a project for him. It was a mission born from pain and loss. Later, as Elon prepared to leave, Susan pulled him aside. I'm worried about him, she admitted. Julian is so focused on his work that he barely eats or sleeps. He doesn't have many friends his age, and I don't want him to lose his childhood chasing something so big. Elon nodded thoughtfully. I understand. He's incredibly gifted, but he's also a kid. Maybe we can find a way to support his genius while still letting him be a child. Susan smiled faintly. I hope so. He looks up to you, you know. I think he sees you as someone who can make the impossible possible. That night, Elon called a meeting with his senior team at SpaceX. We're moving forward with Julian's project, he announced. But we're going to do it on our terms. This won't just be about science. It'll be about protecting him, too. Marissa raised an eyebrow. How do you plan to do that? Elon leaned forward, his gaze intense. We're going to build a team around Julian. Mentors, scientists, even psychologists. He needs guidance, not just resources. And we're going to take it slow. No cutting corners, no unnecessary risks. The team exchanged glances, then nodded. Let's get to work, Elon said. The next day, Elon returned to Julian's house with a proposal. He laid it out on the dining table, a detailed plan for a research lab where Julian could work alongside experts in the field. We'll fund the entire project, Elon explained, but only if you agree to a few conditions. You'll have a team to help you, and you'll take regular breaks. No overworking yourself. And most importantly, you'll still be a kid, school, friends, all of it. Julian's eyes widened as he scanned the proposal. You're serious? You really think we can do this? Elon smiled. I don't just think we can. I think we will. But only if we do it together. Julian looked at his mother, who gave him a small nod. Then he turned back to Elon, his face determined. I'm in. The next chapter of Julian's journey began with a quiet but determined car ride to SpaceX headquarters. Elon himself had come to pick up Julian and his mother, Susan, from their home. Julian sat in the back seat, wide-eyed and fidgeting with a small Rubik's Cube. Susan kept glancing at Elon, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Are you sure this is the right step for him? She asked softly. Elon kept his eyes on the road. I'm sure he's capable, but more importantly, I'm sure we'll guide him. He won't be doing this alone. When they arrived, Julian was ushered into a sprawling, state-of-the-art lab that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. Rows of sleek computers hummed softly, robotic arms moved with precision over tiny components, and holographic projections displayed complex equations mid-air. A small team of specialists was waiting to greet them. Dr. Evelyn Tan, a molecular biologist with a sharp wit and an even sharper intellect. Dr. Raj Patel, an AI researcher known for his groundbreaking work in neural networks. Sam, a young, easygoing robotics engineer who immediately bonded with Julian over a shared love of sci-fi movies. This is your team, Elon said, gesturing toward them. Each of them is here to help you bring your vision to life. Julian was speechless. His eyes darted from one scientist to another, then to the gleaming equipment around him. This is amazing, he finally said. Dr. Tan smiled. And this is just the beginning. We're here to make history, Julian. Are you ready? Julian nodded, but his hands trembled slightly as he clutched his notebook. The first order of business was setting up a dedicated workspace for Julian. While the team had access to the latest technology, Elon insisted that Julian's corner of the lab should feel personal. Susan helped decorate the area with little touches from home. A family photo, a small bookshelf filled with Julian's favorite science books, and a frame drawing he'd made of his father when he was younger. This is your space, Elon said as Julian settled into his chair. You're in charge here, but remember, you have a team for a reason. Lean on them. Julian nodded, his confidence slowly returning. I will. As the team began their work, Julian's brilliance became immediately apparent. He sketched out complex diagrams for an advanced nanotechnology system that could repair damaged cells. Dr. Tan and Dr. Patel were impressed by his detailed understanding of biophysics, while Sam helped him translate his ideas into workable prototypes. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Julian's youth and inexperience quickly became evident when it came to practical implementation. One afternoon, he grew frustrated when a simulation failed to produce the results he'd anticipated. This doesn't make sense, he exclaimed, slamming his hands on the desk. The math is perfect. Why isn't it working? Dr. Patel placed a reassuring hand on Julian's shoulder. Science isn't just about getting it right the first time. It's about learning from what goes wrong. Julian frowned, his frustration still bubbling. But we're wasting time. What if we don't figure it out in time to help people? Elon, who had been observing from a distance, stepped forward. Julian, let me tell you something I've learned. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came from failure. The key is persistence. You don't give up just because something doesn't work the first time, or even the 10th time. Julian took a deep breath, nodding slowly. Okay, let's try again. Despite the challenges, progress came steadily. The team began refining Julian's nanotechnology concept into a prototype, a tiny, programmable device that could target and repair damaged cells. They nicknamed it NanoHope. One evening, after hours of grueling work, the team gathered around a holographic projection of the latest test results. The room was silent as the data streamed across the screen. And then, a breakthrough. The prototype had successfully repaired damaged tissue in a controlled environment. "It works," Dr. Tin whispered, her voice tinged with disbelief. "It actually works." Julian's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "We did it," he said, looking around at the team. Elon smiled, but his expression was tempered with caution. "This is just the beginning," he reminded them. "The next steps will be even harder." As the lab buzzed with excitement, Elon stepped outside for a moment to take a call. It was a reporter from a major news outlet, asking for a comment on the rumors of his latest project. "Elon, the world is abuzz with speculation. Is it true that you're working with an 11-year-old prodigy to make humans immortal?" Elon chuckled. "Let's just say we're exploring the possibilities of extending human life. But it's too early to make any promises." The reporter pressed further. "And the boy, Julian Carter? Is he really the mastermind behind this?" Elon paused, choosing his words carefully. "Julian is one of the brightest minds I've ever met. But this isn't about one person. It's about a team, a mission, and a shared belief in what's possible." As he hung up, Elon glanced back toward the lab. Through the glass, he could see Julian surrounded by his team, his youthful enthusiasm shining through as he explained another idea. The next day, Julian's groundbreaking prototype, NanoHope, was all anyone in the lab could talk about. Word of the team's progress had begun to leak, and whispers of immortality sparked curiosity among the media, scientists, and investors. However, not everyone was thrilled about the idea of rewriting the laws of biology. Elon called for an emergency team meeting to address the growing buzz. They gathered in the conference room, a sleek, futuristic space with glowing blue lights and a wall-sized monitor displaying news headlines. Articles speculating about the project scrolled across the screen. Elon Musk's latest project, Can Science Defy Death? 11-year-old prodigy working on nanotechnology breakthrough. Immortality, dream or dangerous? Julian fidgeted in his seat, feeling the weight of the attention. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the constant pressure of living up to the world's expectations made his chest tighten. Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "This is going to happen," he began, his voice calm but firm. "The world knows about Julian, and they know we're working on something big. But we need to decide how much we reveal and when." Dr. Tan spoke up, her tone cautious. "If we go public too soon, we'll face scrutiny from every angle. Ethics boards, governments, competing corporations. We're not ready for that." Dr. Patel nodded. "Agreed. But staying completely silent could hurt us too. Investors want updates. If they think we're hiding something, they might pull funding." Elon turned to Julian. "What do you think, Julian? You're the heart of this project. How do you want to handle this?" Julian hesitated. He felt a rush of pride knowing they valued his opinion, but the responsibility was overwhelming. "I think we should share some of our progress," he said finally, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Not everything, but enough to show people we're serious and to inspire them." Elon nodded. "That's a good balance. We'll prepare a controlled statement for the media. But remember, the moment we make this public, the pressure will only increase. Are you ready for that?" Julian took a deep breath and nodded. "I am." Later that week, Elon held a press conference at SpaceX headquarters. Cameras flashed as he stood before a sea of journalists. Julian watched nervously from the sidelines, his mother by his side. Elon began with his signature confidence. "We're working on something extraordinary, technology that could redefine what it means to be human. While we're still in the early stages, I'm proud to introduce a key member of our team, Julian Carter." The room buzzed with excitement as Julian stepped forward. He felt his cheeks flush under the intense gaze of the crowd, but he focused on the encouraging smile his mother gave him. Julian's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. We're developing nanotechnology that could help repair and regenerate damaged cells. It's not about living forever. It's about improving the quality of life for everyone. The reporters bombarded them with questions. When will this technology be available to the public? Is it ethical to pursue immortality? Julian, how does it feel to be the youngest person working on such a monumental project? Elon expertly deflected the tougher questions, while Julian answered as best he could. By the end of the conference, the team had managed to strike a delicate balance, revealing enough to captivate the world without over-promising. The media storm that followed was unlike anything Julian had ever experienced. News outlets ran stories about him around the clock, dubbing him the boy who could defy death. His schoolmates sent him messages of admiration and jealousy. His inbox overflowed with emails from strangers, some praising his genius, others accusing him of playing God. One evening, as Julian tried to focus on a new set of equations, his mother knocked on his bedroom door. "Julian, can we talk?" she asked softly. He looked up, exhaustion etched on his young face. "What's wrong, Mom?" Susan sat on the edge of his bed, her expression filled with concern. "I'm worried about you. This is a lot for anyone to handle, let alone an 11-year-old. Are you sure you're okay?" Julian hesitated. "It's overwhelming," he admitted. "But I can't stop now. People are counting on me." Susan hugged him tightly. "Just remember, you don't have to do this alone. Lean on your team, and on me. Promise me you'll take care of yourself too." Julian nodded, his resolve strengthening. "I promise." Back at the lab, the team faced mounting challenges. Investors were growing impatient, demanding faster progress. Ethical watchdogs filed petitions questioning the morality of their work. Even within the team, tensions began to rise as disagreements over the project's direction surfaced. Dr. Tan expressed concerns about the potential misuse of nanohope. What if this technology falls into the wrong hands? We're playing with something that could change the course of humanity, for better or worse. Dr. Patel countered, "That's why we need to stay focused. If we don't develop it, someone else will, and they might not have the same ethical considerations." Elon stepped in, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're not here to debate hypotheticals. We're here to solve problems. Julian, what's our next step?" Julian, who had been quietly absorbing the discussion, looked up with a determined glint in his eye. "We need to test nanohope on something more complex, something closer to real human tissue." The room fell silent. Everyone knew this was the logical next step, but it also came with higher stakes and greater scrutiny. The tension in the lab was palpable. Julian sat at his desk, reviewing the data from their latest nanotech experiment. The screen in front of him flickered with numbers, codes, and complex equations. It was all starting to come together. Nanohope was showing promise, but something felt off. The world was watching, and the pressure to succeed was growing by the day. Suddenly, the door to the lab opened with a soft chime, breaking his concentration. Julian looked up, surprised to see a man standing in the doorway. He was tall, dressed in a sharp suit, and his expression was unreadable. His eyes locked with Julian's, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade away. "Elon, I need a word," the man said, his voice cool and controlled. Elon, who had been deep in conversation with Dr. Patel, turned and narrowed his eyes at the visitor. "What is it, Merton?" The man, Merton, walked into the room without waiting for permission, exuding an air of authority. "We need to talk about your project. Now." Elon stood up, his brow furrowing. "Not here. This is a private facility." Merton smirked, not intimidated. "I don't need your permission, Musk. You've been making waves, and I'm here to make sure you're not overstepping." Julian felt a shiver run down his spine. Merton's tone wasn't just dismissive, it was threatening. Merton turned to Julian. "You're the one, aren't you? The kid who thinks he can change the world." He eyed Julian up and down, his gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. Julian nodded slowly, unsure of how to respond to the stranger's harsh tone. Elon stepped between them, his voice now icy. "I don't know what you're implying, but this is not the place for whatever you're about to do." Merton ignored him, his eyes fixed on Julian. "I've been following your work, Impressive. But there's a problem. Dr. Tan and Dr. Patel exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the tension building in the room. What problem? Elon asked, his patience wearing thin. Merton crossed his arms, his face stoic. You're meddling with things that humanity isn't ready for. Immortality, it's not something anyone should play with. You think you can just jump to the top of the ladder without considering the consequences? What happens when people start abusing this power? Julian's heart raced, and he glanced at Elon, hoping for reassurance. But Elon's face was unreadable. We've considered the risks, Elon said, his voice calm but firm. That's why we're moving carefully. Merton scoffed. Carefully? You've made a public spectacle of this, Musk. Now the world knows about this technology. The wrong people are watching you. You've opened Pandora's box, and I'm here to close it. Julian's stomach tightened. He had always known there would be opposition to their work, but this felt different. Merton wasn't just a concerned scientist or a worried investor. He was someone with real power, someone who wasn't afraid to throw his weight around. Elon, we don't need to be hostile, Dr. Patel interjected, her voice hesitant. Let's just hear what he has to say. Maybe we can. No, Merton cut her off sharply. This isn't a discussion. You're too young to fully understand the implications, Julian. You're playing with fire, and I'm here to stop you before you burn the whole world. Julian felt his chest tighten. He had dreamed of changing the world for the better, but now he was beginning to question if he had the strength to see it through. The burden of nanohope was heavy, and the skepticism around it was growing. Merton turned to Elon. I'm not asking for your approval, Musk. I'm here to shut this down. You've been warned. With those final words, Merton turned on his heel and walked out of the lab, leaving a lingering silence in his wake. Elon stood motionless for a long moment, his face hard as stone. Dr. Tan and Dr. Patel exchanged worried glances, unsure of what to do next. Julian, however, couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger than their project was at stake. Elon, Julian finally spoke, his voice quiet but unwavering. Who was he, and what does he want? Elon let out a deep breath and looked at Julian, his eyes softening just slightly. Merton is a part of a group, a very powerful group, that doesn't believe in pushing the boundaries the way we do. They've been monitoring our progress for weeks, and they don't want us to succeed. But why? Julian asked, feeling a knot form in his stomach. Is it because of the immortality part? Are they afraid of what could happen if we succeed? Elon nodded slowly. Yes. They see what we're doing as too risky, too dangerous. But there are always those who fear progress, especially when it challenges the status quo. Julian felt a surge of frustration. But we're doing this to help people. Why can't they see that? Elon placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, a rare sign of reassurance. Not everyone will understand, Julian. The road ahead will be full of challenges. But as long as you keep your focus, we'll overcome them together. Julian's resolve solidified. He wasn't going to let Merton or anyone else stand in the way of their vision. The message blinked on Julian's screen like a warning beacon in the dark. It was simple, just a few words, but the implications were anything but. I know what you're doing, and I can help. Julian stared at the screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. His mind raced. Who could this be? How did they know about nanohope? They had been careful, very careful, about keeping their research confidential. Yet, here was this cryptic message, appearing out of nowhere. The room around him seemed to close in. Dr. Patel was still at her desk, running simulations. Elon was pacing back and forth, looking out the window, clearly deep in thought. Julian couldn't focus on the conversations happening around him. His mind was fixated on the message. Elon, he finally said, his voice tinged with concern, we need to talk. Elon turned, his brow furrowing at Julian's serious tone. What is it? I got a message, Julian said, pointing at his screen. It's anonymous. They know what we're doing, and they say they can help. Elon walked over, his eyes scanning the message quickly. Huh, that's odd. I don't like the sound of it. His voice had a sharp edge, a hint of suspicion creeping in. Do you think it's from Merton's group? Julian shook his head. I don't know. It doesn't seem like something they would do. Merton was pretty clear about wanting to shut us down, not offer help. He paused, considering. But this person knows too much. They're watching us. There was a long, tense silence. Dr. Patel leaned in, squinting at the screen. What do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't just ignore this. Whoever it is could be dangerous, or they might actually be able to help us. Elon's eyes narrowed. We don't take chances. We need to find out who this is, but we have to be careful. Whoever is behind this message might have their own agenda. For a moment, Julian felt his stomach churn. Was he ready to dive into something even more dangerous? He had always dreamt of changing the world, of making humans immortal. But now, with the constant threat looming over him, he realized how high the stakes were. Let's respond, Julian said, his voice steady, though his hands trembled slightly. We need to know what they want. Elon nodded. Fine, but you're not doing this alone. We'll keep an eye on everything. We'll control the narrative. Julian typed a reply quickly, his mind racing as his fingers moved over the keys. Who are you? And how do you know about NanoHope? The response came back within seconds. It was short but packed with information. I have a way in. Meet me tomorrow night at the old train station at midnight. Don't bring anyone. I'll be waiting. The next day dragged on for what felt like an eternity. Every time Julian looked at his phone, he half expected another message from the mysterious contact, but none came. The uncertainty gnawed at him. He wasn't sure if he was making a huge mistake by meeting with a stranger, or if this person could actually provide the missing piece they needed to push NanoHope to the next level. Elon was on edge too. He had barely spoken during their meeting, only offering his usual advice to proceed with caution. But there was a flicker of worry in his eyes whenever he looked at Julian. Are you sure you want to do this? Elon asked quietly as they stood near the elevator after the meeting. We don't know anything about this person. What if they're just trying to manipulate us? Julian met Elon's gaze. I have to know. We have to know if this is the breakthrough we've been waiting for, or if it's just another trap. Elon sighed, his fingers drumming lightly against the side of the elevator. All right, I get it. But don't do anything reckless. We'll be watching. If anything feels off, you come straight back here. Got it? I will, Julian said, his voice resolute. That night, Julian made his way to the old train station. It was one of those places that had been left to decay, an eerie reminder of a time long past. The streets were empty, and the air was cool and still. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the quiet of the station made everything feel more unsettling. At exactly midnight, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, his features hidden by the hood of his jacket. He didn't speak at first, only gesturing for Julian to follow him down the narrow path that led to the platform. Who are you? Julian asked, his voice low, wary. The man didn't answer at first, only leading him further into the darkness. Julian's heart raced, but he kept his steps steady. They came to a small, dimly lit room near the platform, where the man finally stopped and turned to face him. I'm someone who's been watching, the man said, his voice rough, almost gravelly. I'm not with Merton, and I'm not here to stop you. I'm here to help. Julian felt a mixture of relief and caution. How do you know about NanoHope? He asked. The man's eyes glinted in the dim light. Because I've been part of the research from the beginning, but I've been working in the shadows, under a different name, different identity. I'm part of a team who wants to see this succeed, but there's something you need to know. Merton isn't the only one who's against you. There are others, powerful people who won't stop until they destroy your project. Julian's pulse quickened. So what do we do? The man leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You need to move faster. You need to finish the NanoHope trials as soon as possible. The longer you wait, the more dangerous it becomes. And trust no one, not even those closest to you. The air felt thick with tension as Julian walked back to the office, his mind racing with the man's cryptic warnings. Move faster. Trust no one. The words echoed in his mind, louder than the rhythmic beat of his heart. What was he supposed to do with this new information? He was already working at breakneck speed on NanoHope, but now there was the fear of an even greater conspiracy, one that could ruin everything they had worked for. As he entered the office, the familiar hum of the lab greeted him. Dr. Patel was at her desk, reviewing data from their last round of experiments. Elon was on the phone, his voice low but clearly agitated. Julian stood in the doorway for a moment, catching his breath before walking in. "Julian, you're back," Dr. Patel said, looking up from her monitor. "Did you find anything? Who was it?" The question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment as Julian struggled to put his thoughts into words. "It was a man," he said finally, his voice distant. "He knows a lot. He claims to be on our side, but I don't know if we can trust him." Elon hung up the phone and turned his attention to Julian. His expression was guarded, the concern in his eyes unmistakable. "Did he say anything useful?" Julian nodded slowly, recounting the meeting. "He said Merton isn't the only one we should be worried about. There are more people, powerful people, who want to see NanoHope fail. He didn't give much detail, but he warned us to move faster, that we don't have much time." A silence settled over the room, thick and uncomfortable. Dr. Patel's fingers hovered over her keyboard, but she didn't type. Elon's face remained unreadable, though his jaw was clenched tight, as if processing every word Julian had just said. "Great," Elon muttered under his breath. "Just what we need, more enemies. We're already dealing with Merton, and now this?" Julian felt a pang of uncertainty. Elon's words were harsh, but they were true. The project was already under attack from all sides. They had barely been able to fend off Merton's legal team, and now this mysterious person was adding a new layer of complexity. "What do we do now?" Dr. Patel asked quietly, breaking the silence. Julian looked at her, then at Elon. His mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. "We keep moving forward, but we need to be smarter. We can't trust anyone who hasn't proven themselves, not even people on the inside. We have to double-check everything and make sure no one is sabotaging us from within." Elon's eyes hardened. "Agreed. We tighten security, and we make sure no one gets near the project without our approval." Julian nodded, a sense of dread creeping up his spine. They were already working at full capacity, but now they had to contend with the fact that someone was actively working against them. Not just Merton, but an entire network of people. The road ahead was fraught with danger, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur of activity. Julian, Elon, and Dr. Patel pored over the latest data, trying to make sense of the breakthroughs they had achieved with NanoHope. The project was moving faster than ever, but the weight of their situation hung over them like a dark cloud. They were racing against time, and the clock was ticking louder with every passing minute. But even as they worked tirelessly, a strange unease settled into Julian's gut. The mysterious man's warning wasn't far from his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. And worst of all, he couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had been with him from the beginning. One night, after another long day in the lab, Julian sat alone in his office. The silence of the room was almost deafening as he stared at his screen, going over the same data for what felt like the 100th time. He was exhausted, physically and mentally, but his mind wouldn't let him rest. Then, out of the corner of his eye, something caught his attention. It was a notification. The same anonymous figure had sent him another message. This time, it was different. "You're not alone in this. But don't trust them." Julian's heart skipped a beat. The message was brief, but it felt more ominous than the last. Who was them? Was this a warning or a test? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, torn between responding and staying silent. If this person was truly on their side, they needed to trust him. But if he was part of the conspiracy, Julian would be walking right into a trap. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Startled, Julian quickly closed the message, but it was too late. Elon stepped inside, his expression unreadable. "Who was that?" Elon asked, his voice low. Julian hesitated. "Just a message. It's from the same person. They're warning me again. They say I'm not alone, but that I shouldn't trust them." Elon frowned. "Who's them? What are we missing?" "I don't know," Julian replied, rubbing his temples, "but I feel like we're being played. I don't know who's on our side anymore." Elon walked in, closing the door behind him. His voice was quieter now, but more serious. "You need to be careful. I know you're under pressure, but these people, They want to control NanoHope. And if we're not careful, they'll do anything to make sure we fail. The weight of Elon's words hung in the air, suffocating the space between them. Julian's gut twisted. He didn't know who to trust anymore. Could he even trust Elon? The next few days passed in a blur, and the once familiar lab now felt like a ticking time bomb. Julian's unease had only grown since the cryptic message. He couldn't shake the nagging feeling that someone was watching them, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every movement felt scrutinized, every word analyzed. The pressure was getting to him. Late one evening, as the lab's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, Julian stood before the large glass window in his office, staring out into the sprawling city below. The city seemed peaceful, oblivious to the storm brewing inside NanoHope. But inside the lab, it was anything but calm. He turned away from the window and looked at the team gathered around the central workstation. Dr. Patel, as usual, was absorbed in the numbers, her face a mask of concentration. Elon, however, was pacing the floor, his eyes darting between the monitors and the reports on the desk. Something about his movements felt off. For the first time in weeks, Julian noticed that Elon was no longer his usual calm, calculated self. He was agitated, maybe even afraid. "Julian," Elon said suddenly, his voice sharp, "we need to talk." Julian tensed, his heart rate picking up. He nodded, signaling for Elon to follow him into the adjacent office. Once they were inside and the door shut, Julian finally let out the breath he had been holding. "What's going on, Elon?" he asked, trying to mask the suspicion in his voice. "You've been on edge for days." Elon ran a hand through his hair, his face showing a rare vulnerability. "It's not just the pressure," he began slowly, his words measured, as though he were carefully choosing them. "I've been doing some digging into Merton's team, and I found something." Julian's stomach dropped. He had feared this moment, but hearing it out loud was another thing entirely. "What did you find?" Julian asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his hands were starting to shake. Elon hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a hushed tone. "It's not just Merton. There's someone on the inside. Someone here, in this very building, feeding information to him. They've been sabotaging NanoHope from the beginning." Julian's mind raced as the words sank in. "What are you talking about? How can you be sure?" "I did a little more digging," Elon said, his eyes darkening. "There's a discrepancy in our security systems. Someone bypassed the firewall last week. Someone with access to our most sensitive data. The logs are clear. And the thing is, it's someone who's been with us from the start." The words hit Julian like a punch to the gut. He felt his knees go weak, but he steadied himself. "You're saying one of us is betraying the project?" Elon nodded grimly. "Yes, and I think we both know who it is." Julian's breath caught in his throat. He could already feel the answer creeping into his thoughts. "It's Dr. Patel." The thought was like a physical blow. Dr. Patel had been their ally since the beginning. Her brilliance had been a cornerstone of the project's success. She was supposed to be the one person he could trust. But now, doubts were gnawing at him. What if everything he thought he knew was a lie? "Are you sure?" Julian's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It can't be her, Elon. She's been with us through everything." Elon's eyes met his, unflinching. "I know what you're thinking. I don't want to believe it either. But the evidence doesn't lie." The room fell silent. Julian's mind swirled with conflicting emotions: betrayal, confusion, fear. He had worked with Dr. Patel for years. She had been more than a colleague. She was a friend. The idea that she could be the one behind their problems was too much to bear. But then the truth hit him. It wasn't just about the project anymore. NanoHope had become much bigger than any of them. It was about something more, a vision for the future of humanity, something that had the potential to change the world. And if someone was sabotaging them, that meant the stakes were even higher than he had ever imagined. "What do we do now?" Julian asked, his voice hoarse. "We can't confront her yet," Elon said, his tone steely. "We need proof, and we need to move fast. If we're right, she's already making her next move." The next morning, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. He watched Dr. Patel as she moved around the lab, her usual focused demeanor now tinged with something else, a hint of unease, perhaps, or guilt. But then again, maybe he was just looking for something that wasn't there. He had to be sure. He and Elon had agreed on a plan. They would keep a close eye on Dr. Patel without her knowing, carefully monitoring her actions for any sign of betrayal. They couldn't afford to confront her prematurely, not when the fate of the entire project hung in the balance. But with every passing minute, the suspicion grew. Was this really happening? Was someone they trusted so completely capable of treachery? That night, as the lab grew quieter, Julian sat at his desk, his fingers tapping nervously on the surface. He kept replaying the conversation with Elon in his head, unable to push the fear away. In the stillness, the sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway outside his office. He glanced up, expecting to see one of the security team members. Instead, the door to his office opened, and Dr. Patel walked in. Julian's heart skipped a beat. "Julian," she said softly, her voice almost too calm. "We need to talk." The tension in the air was palpable as Dr. Patel stepped into the room. Her presence, once a source of comfort and intellectual camaraderie, now felt suffocating. Julian's mind raced as he tried to make sense of her calm demeanor, which felt strangely out of place given the storm brewing between them. He nodded toward the chair opposite his desk, gesturing for her to sit. "What is it, Dr. Patel?" His voice was steady, but the tremor of uncertainty beneath it was hard to disguise. Dr. Patel didn't sit. Instead, she stood by the door, her eyes scanning the room as if she were searching for something. Perhaps a hidden camera, perhaps a clue to something she hadn't expected to find. Julian noticed her hand subtly twitch toward the pocket of her lab coat, where he knew she kept her phone. The small movement caught his attention. "Julian," she began, her voice betraying none of the tension that was suffocating him. "There's something you need to know. Something you'll want to hear directly from me before you hear it from anyone else." Julian's stomach dropped. He had been expecting this moment, but now that it was here, the weight of it seemed unbearable. He didn't trust his own thoughts. Could she be playing him? Could this be her confession? Or was it part of the charade? The back of his mind screamed to trust her. After all, they had been through so much together. But the nagging seed of doubt was too strong to ignore. "What's going on, Dr. Patel?" he asked again, his voice low but firm. She finally moved to the chair, sitting down slowly, her gaze unwavering. "I know what you and Elon have been looking into," she said, her tone measured. "I know you're investigating the leaks, and I know you think it's me." Julian's breath hitched. The air seemed to grow colder. He had to resist the urge to ask the question that was bubbling up inside him. Was this the confession he feared, or was it a carefully constructed diversion? "I didn't want to hide this from you, Julian," she continued, her words heavy with sincerity. "But it's not what you think. I wasn't the one feeding information to Merton's team. But there is someone very close to all of us." Julian's mind spun. He leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "Then who? Who is it?" Dr. Patel's gaze hardened. "It's someone we've trusted. Someone who has been manipulating the situation from within." Julian's stomach dropped. He had known that the enemy was close, but hearing it from Dr. Patel herself brought the reality crashing down on him. He felt as though the floor had been ripped out from under him, leaving him dangling in midair. "It's Elon," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hit him like a punch. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, everything seemed to blur around him. Elon? The man who had brought him into this groundbreaking project? The man who had believed in the vision of nano-hope when no one else did? No, it couldn't be. Julian shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had suddenly descended upon him. "You're lying," Julian spat, his voice raw. "Elon would never do that. He's not the one behind this. He's been with us from the start. We've been in this together." His voice trembled, his disbelief spilling out. Dr. Patel remained calm, unfazed by his outburst. "I understand how hard this is to believe. Believe me, I don't want it to be true either. But the evidence is irrefutable. I've seen the communications. I've seen the plans. Elon has been playing both sides. He's been feeding information to Merton, sabotaging nano-hope in ways we don't even understand yet." Julian's mind whirled, struggling to process the accusation. He couldn't believe it. Elon? But the more he thought about it, the more the pieces started to fall into place. Elon's recent behavior, his unexplained absences, the strange way he seemed to know just a little too much about the progress of Merton's team. No, this couldn't be true. He refused to believe it. There's no way, Julian said, his voice barely audible. You must have misunderstood. There's some kind of mistake. Dr. Patel's eyes softened, but only for a moment. I wish that were true. I wish I could say that this is all some terrible misunderstanding. But the truth is staring us in the face, Julian. And you're too close to him to see it. He's using you. He's using all of us. A cold shiver ran down Julian's spine. He thought of all the late nights, the discussions, the breakthroughs they had shared. How could this man, the one who had believed in the potential of immortality, the one who had built NanoHope, be the very one tearing it apart? Why are you telling me this now? Julian whispered, his voice breaking. Dr. Patel leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with a level of intensity that made him feel as though she could see right through him. Because I think you deserve to know. And because I'm done being part of this lie. We have to stop him, Julian, before it's too late. For the first time, Julian could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that mirrored his own. The door to the office opened, and both of them turned instinctively. Elon stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the light behind him. I see you two have been having a conversation, he said, his voice icy. Julian's heart pounded in his chest. The truth was standing before him now, in the form of the man he had once trusted above all others. Elon stepped forward, his eyes flicking between Julian and Dr. Patel. What have you been telling him, Patel? He asked, his voice deceptively calm. Dr. Patel rose slowly, her posture tense. It's over, Elon, she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her eyes. The truth is out. The silence in the room was suffocating. Julian's mind raced, his body frozen in place. Elon's sudden appearance only added to the whirlwind of confusion and disbelief that had consumed him. The words Dr. Patel had just spoken echoed in his mind, and he struggled to reconcile them with the person he had come to trust over the years. Elon stood there, a quiet storm of emotions hidden beneath his calculated expression. Julian's gaze flicked from Elon to Dr. Patel and back again. What was going on? Had he been wrong all along about the people he trusted? What are you talking about, Patel? Elon asked again, his voice steely. Why are you trying to poison his mind with these ridiculous accusations? Dr. Patel didn't flinch. Her gaze never wavered from Elon. She had always been the more composed of the two, but there was something different about her now, something fierce. I'm not the one poisoning anyone's mind, Elon. You've been playing both sides from the start, feeding information to Merton and trying to destroy everything we've worked for. Julian blinked, his stomach turning as the words sank in. Merton, the competitor, the businessman who had been threatening to crush NanoHope, had been getting inside information from Elon? The realization hit him like a freight train. How had he not seen this? How had he let himself be so blind? Elon's expression flickered for a moment, but only for a fraction of a second. Then, as if recovering from a slip-up, his face hardened into something cold and distant. I don't know what she's talking about, Julian, Elon said. This is a lie. She's trying to frame me for something I didn't do. Julian felt the tension rising in his chest. He wanted to believe Elon. He had to believe him. But the evidence, Dr. Patel's words, the strange moments over the past few weeks, were too much to ignore. Something was off. Dr. Patel crossed her arms, her voice unwavering. The truth is, Elon, you've been manipulating everything from the inside. You wanted to control NanoHope, not for the sake of science, but for your own agenda. Julian turned to Elon, his heart pounding. Is it true, Elon? His voice cracked with desperation. Have you been helping Merton? Elon's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Julian saw something. Something that wasn't just cold calculation, but something darker. I did what I had to do to ensure the future, Elon said, his voice calm but laced with something dangerous. You don't understand. NanoHope isn't just about immortality, it's about power, control. It's the future of humanity, Julian. I couldn't let you and Patel stand in my way. Julian's breath caught. What do you mean, stand in your way? You said we were doing this for humanity. For everyone. Elon shook his head slowly, almost pityingly. You're naive. Do you really think a few people with lofty ideals can change the course of history? I was trying to do what needed to be done. I was trying to secure the future. Immortality is just the beginning. Nanohope could give me the keys to controlling everything. The economy, the world, the future itself. The words hit Julian like a punch to the gut. He had always known Elon was ambitious, but this was something else entirely. Control? Power? Immortality wasn't just about curing disease or extending life. It was about domination. Julian felt his worldview crumbling. You're insane, Julian whispered, his voice trembling. He could barely believe the words coming from Elon's mouth. The person he had looked up to, admired for his visionary ideas, was now revealing himself to be something darker. A man willing to sacrifice everything for power. Elon didn't flinch. No, Julian. I'm not insane. I'm enlightened. You'll understand. Eventually. But for now, it's too late for you to change anything. The wheels are already in motion. Merton and I, we have a plan. And you, Patel, you're just an obstacle now. Dr. Patel's eyes burned with determination, but Julian could see the fear behind them. She knew something he didn't. She had been a part of this for too long, and now, it seemed like there was no way out. I won't let you do this, Dr. Patel said, her voice steady but fierce. We've already sacrificed too much. I'm not letting you destroy everything just for your own gain. Elon's expression twisted into something cruel, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. It's already destroyed, Patel. You just don't realize it yet. Julian could feel the tension in the room intensifying. The conflict between Dr. Patel and Elon had come to a head, and there was no turning back now. The secrets, the lies, and the manipulations were all laid bare, and Julian was trapped in the middle of it. I won't be part of this, Julian said, his voice rising with conviction. If you think you're going to use me, or use Nanohope to play God, you're wrong. Elon's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Julian saw a flicker of real anger. You don't have a choice, Julian. You're too deep in now. You've seen too much. There's no way out for you. Dr. Patel's eyes met Julian's, and for the first time, he saw the desperation in them. We can't let him win, Julian. You have to help me stop him. A heavy silence settled over the room as Julian stood at the crossroads of his own fate. On one side was Elon, the man who had promised to lead humanity into a new era of immortality. On the other was Dr. Patel, the woman who had revealed the truth behind Elon's dark motives. What was the right choice? Was there even a choice? The tension in the room was palpable. Every breath Julian took felt like it was weighed down by the gravity of the choice before him. His heart raced in his chest, his mind clouded with uncertainty. Elon's words echoed in his ears, mingling with the fire in Dr. Patel's eyes. Both of them wanted him, but for entirely different reasons. The future of Nanohope, and possibly the future of humanity, rested on the next decision he made. Julian turned slowly toward Dr. Patel, her face a mixture of determination and fear. She had fought tooth and nail for this project, and now it seemed like the very thing they had worked for was being twisted into something unrecognizable. She was desperate to stop Elon, to prevent him from manipulating the very technology that had the potential to save the world. But then there was Elon, the genius, the visionary. Julian had followed him for years, admired his brilliance. Now, that same brilliance seemed dangerously bent toward an agenda that Julian could barely comprehend. Control, power, immortality. Was it possible that Elon's vision for the future was, in fact, a necessary evil? Was Julian missing something? Could he really stand against him? I won't be part of this, Julian said again, his voice stronger this time. The words tasted bitter in his mouth, but they felt right. This wasn't the future he had imagined when he first joined the project. His purpose was clear from the start, to help humanity, not to give one man dominion over it. Elon's eyes narrowed. There was no longer any trace of the warmth and encouragement that had once been so evident in his demeanor. Now, his gaze was cold, calculating, dangerous. You don't have a choice, Julian. You're in this now. You're tangled in it, and no matter how much you resist, You'll eventually see that what I'm doing is what needs to be done. Dr. Patel stepped closer, her voice low but fierce. Julian, listen to me. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Elon has been lying to us this entire time. NanoHope wasn't about saving lives. It was about controlling them. He wants to make himself immortal, not for the betterment of humanity, but for his own ego. You have to stop him before it's too late. Julian looked between the two of them, torn. He had always believed in the potential of NanoHope. He had joined the project with a clear goal, to help people, to use science to defeat death itself. But now, it seemed like the path they were on was leading to something darker, something more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. He turned back to Elon. You're asking me to believe in your vision, but your vision isn't about saving humanity. It's about controlling it. You don't care about us. You don't care about NanoHope. You care about power. Elon's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. Power is the only thing that can change the world, Julian. You'll understand that when you're older. Julian's stomach churned. There was no turning back now. Elon wasn't the man he thought he was. He was something much darker, someone who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. And Julian was caught in the middle. For the first time, Julian felt a pang of doubt. What if he was wrong? What if Elon's vision, though ruthless, was the only way forward? What if humanity needed someone to take control, someone with the strength to shape the future, regardless of the cost? The pressure was suffocating. He glanced at Dr. Patel again. Her eyes were pleading with him, silently begging him to stand firm, to resist the temptation of power, to choose the right path. He had never seen her like this before. So vulnerable, so human. This was more than just a scientific project. This was a fight for the soul of the world. You have to make a choice, Julian, Dr. Patel said softly. This isn't just about NanoHope. This is about the kind of world we want to live in. Do you want a world where one man controls everything? Or do you want a world where people still have a say in their future? The word struck Julian like a blow to the chest. He had been so focused on the science, on the discovery, that he had failed to see the bigger picture. The stakes weren't just about extending life. They were about freedom, about what it meant to be human. His eyes flicked between Elon and Dr. Patel. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. He couldn't let this spiral out of control. NanoHope was too important, but it couldn't be used as a weapon in someone's personal crusade. I'm not going to let you destroy everything, Julian said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. I won't be part of your vision, Elon. Not anymore. For a moment, there was silence. Elon's expression hardened, and for the first time, Julian saw a flicker of real fury. The mask was slipping. You think you can just walk away from this, Julian? Elon said, his voice low, threatening. You think you can stop me? Dr. Patel placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, a small gesture of reassurance. You can stop him, Julian. Together, we can. But Elon wasn't finished. You'll regret this, he warned, his voice cold with menace. You have no idea what you're up against. Before Julian could respond, Elon turned sharply and walked toward the door. This isn't over, he said over his shoulder, his words hanging in the air like a threat. I'll make sure of it. As the door slammed behind him, Julian felt the weight of the decision he had just made sink in. He had chosen his side, but the road ahead would be far from easy. Elon wasn't going to let him go without a fight. But for now, Julian could only focus on one thing. NanoHope was still their project, and he wasn't going to let it fall into the wrong hands. The hours after Elon's departure felt like an eternity. Julian couldn't shake the weight of the decision he had just made. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Elon's cold stare, heard his chilling warning echoing in his mind. You'll regret this. The words replayed over and over, a haunting reminder of what they were up against. Julian sat in the same conference room where they had had the confrontation, but it no longer felt like the place where ideas were born and dreams were built. The sterile walls seemed to close in around him, suffocating him. He glanced over at Dr. Patel, who had been quietly sitting at the other end of the table, lost in thought. I don't think he's going to let us get away with this, Julian said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was hoarse, though he wasn't sure why. Dr. Patel didn't look up at first. When she finally did, Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. We knew this was coming. The moment Elon stepped into this project, he was always going to be the biggest obstacle. We can't let him manipulate NanoHope into something it was never meant to be. Julian ran a hand through his hair. He wasn't sure how much longer they could keep fighting this battle. Elon Musk wasn't just any tech billionaire. He was a visionary, a genius. Julian understood that. But he had never imagined that Elon's vision would be so twisted, so fixated on his own immortality. Dr. Patel stood up, pacing in front of the whiteboard filled with equations and diagrams, all of which now seemed meaningless. "We have to think ahead," she said, her voice steady but filled with a quiet intensity. "Elon will use NanoHope as a weapon. If we don't stop him, he'll start by making small changes, things we might not even notice at first. Then, before we know it, he'll have complete control over the entire project. And after that, it won't be NanoHope anymore." Julian's stomach clenched. The enormity of what they were up against was starting to sink in. "What do we do next?" he asked, almost rhetorically. The words felt empty in the air. "We need to gain control of NanoHope again," Dr. Patel said firmly. "We need to take it out of Elon's hands and make sure the project stays true to its original purpose, to save humanity, not enslave it." Julian nodded, but doubts still lingered. "How do we even begin? Elon's already several steps ahead of us. And after what happened, he'll be expecting us to make a move." Dr. Patel's eyes flickered with a strange, almost desperate resolve. "We don't have a choice. We'll have to fight fire with fire. Elon thinks he's untouchable, but he isn't. He's made a lot of enemies over the years, people who might be willing to help us take him down." The mention of enemies made Julian pause. Elon's influence spanned industries, and his reach seemed limitless. But Julian knew Dr. Patel wasn't wrong. If they were going to stop him, they needed to act fast, and they needed allies. They couldn't do this alone. Suddenly, the door to the conference room burst open. Julian and Dr. Patel both turned, instinctively standing at the ready. It was Sarah, one of the lead engineers on NanoHope. She looked shaken, her face pale, her breath coming in short bursts. "They're here," she gasped. "Who?" Julian asked, his pulse quickening. "Elon's people," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've arrived at the facility. They're taking over NanoHope. The entire building is on lockdown." Julian's heart skipped a beat. "What are they doing?" "They're taking control of the servers, Julian. It's happening faster than we expected. He's not wasting any time." Without thinking, Julian grabbed his coat and moved toward the door. "We need to get to the server room. Now." Dr. Patel was right behind him, her face set in grim determination. "This is it. If they get full control, it's over. We have to move faster." They rushed down the hallways of the building, the echo of their hurried footsteps amplifying their fear. Julian could feel the tension in the air. There was no time for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. They needed to stop Elon's people before it was too late. When they reached the server room, the door was locked, and the usual security measures had been bypassed. Julian's mind raced. How had they managed to get in so quickly? He couldn't help but feel that they had underestimated just how far Elon would go to maintain control. "We need to get in there," Julian said, his voice low, as he tried to think of a way to breach the door. "They're going to upload something. I don't know what yet, but if they manage it—" "We can't let that happen," Dr. Patel interrupted, her eyes scanning the security panel beside the door. There was a sudden, sharp sound from down the hall, footsteps. Julian tensed, signaling for silence. He could hear voices, too, low and urgent. "They're coming," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Patel moved quickly, pulling out a small device from her bag. It was an emergency override tool they had used during the development of NanoHope for situations just like this. She knelt beside the door and began working on the panel, her hands steady despite the looming threat. Julian glanced at Sarah. "Get back. You need to stay out of sight." Sarah nodded, stepping back into the shadows as Dr. Patel's fingers flew across the device. Julian felt his heart pounding in his chest. Time was running out. The door beeped, and with a soft click, it opened. Dr. Patel stood up, her face flushed with relief, but her eyes still sharp with focus. "Let's go." They entered the server room, where rows of machines hummed with life. Julian felt his breath catch in his throat. The room was already filled with Elon's people. Armed, tense, their eyes darting nervously as if expecting an ambush. "Stay calm," Julian whispered. "We can still do this." But even as he said the words, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The tension in the server room was suffocating. Julian stood frozen, trying to make sense of the scene before him. Elon's agents, faces obscured by dark sunglasses and tactical gear, were everywhere, spreading out across the room, methodically accessing terminals and typing in commands with mechanical precision. It was like a well-rehearsed drill. Julian had no doubt. They were here to finish what Elon had started. Dr. Patel's voice broke through his thoughts. "We need to get to the main control center," she whispered, urgency lacing her words. "If we don't stop them from uploading that code, everything we've worked for will be lost." Julian nodded, his mind racing. The server room was vast, filled with rows of high-tech machines, their blinking lights casting an eerie glow across the room. The walls were lined with intricate security systems, designed to prevent unauthorized access to the core of Nano Hope. But here, surrounded by Elon's agents, even that felt irrelevant. "Stay close," Julian whispered to Dr. Patel, motioning for her to follow him. He moved swiftly but silently, using the maze of machinery for cover. They had to act quickly, or they'd be out of time. As they neared the control center, Julian's eyes flickered to the far side of the room, where a lone agent was staring at a monitor, a suspicious smile playing on his lips. It was almost as if he was waiting for something. Julian couldn't quite place it, but something about that agent's behavior sent a chill down his spine. Before Julian could react, Dr. Patel grabbed his arm. "We have to move. Now." They slipped into a narrow corridor leading to the back of the control center. The agent in the corner was too distracted to notice them, his attention focused on the screen, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Julian and Dr. Patel pressed on, knowing this was their only chance. Just as they reached the control panel, Sarah's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Julian, Patel, they've started the upload. You've got minutes before they lock us out completely." Julian's heart skipped a beat. "We're almost there," he murmured, but the words felt hollow. The weight of the moment pressed on him, suffocating him as the seconds ticked by. The control center was in sight now, only a few feet away. Julian steeled himself, motioning for Dr. Patel to get ready. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, 3. They burst into the room, and Julian immediately slammed his hand down on the emergency shutdown switch. The whole room flickered as the systems powered down in response, but to his horror, the screen in front of them didn't change. Instead, it displayed a single line of text: "Access denied." "No," Julian muttered. "They've locked us out." Dr. Patel was already on her feet, fingers flying across the backup terminal. "We've been compromised," she said through clenched teeth. "They've set up a secondary firewall. We can't override it without triggering a complete shutdown of Nano Hope." "It's a trap?" "Then we'll just have to find another way in," Julian said, his voice cold. There was no time for fear, no room for hesitation. He had to think of something. They could hear the agents moving toward them, their boots echoing through the narrow corridor. Julian had a moment of clarity. "There's one more thing we can try, but it's risky. We could tap into the old system's backdoor, if we can reach the central hub before they notice." Dr. Patel looked at him, disbelief flashing across her face. "You're talking about bypassing everything. There's no guarantee that will work. We'll be exposed." Julian clenched his fists. "We don't have a choice. We either do this or we lose everything." Before Dr. Patel could respond, Sarah's voice came through again, panic rising in her tone. "Julian, they've activated the emergency lockdown. We're sealed in. They'll be here any second." The words were cut off by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps, multiple agents storming toward them. "There's no time," Julian said, pulling Dr. Patel toward the maintenance shaft. "We're going underground." The two of them sprinted down the narrow hallway, weaving between the dimly lit service corridors. The sound of the agents' boots was growing louder. They were closing in. Julian's pulse raced. He had no idea what to expect, but if they didn't make it to the old systems, they were done. They reached the maintenance hatch, a thick metal door at the end of the hall. Julian pushed against it, and with a creak, it opened, revealing a dark, narrow staircase that descended deep beneath the facility. Julian hesitated for a second, listening. The footsteps were almost upon them. He motioned for Dr. Patel to go first, then followed her down into the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the walls smelled of metal and grease. It was claustrophobic, but it was their only chance. They moved quickly, Julian's mind racing, his every sense tuned to the sound of the footsteps behind them. The noise grew louder, closer. He could hear their breathing now, shallow, calculated. They were hunting them. Dr. Patel's voice broke through his thoughts. If we can reach the old control room, we can break through the firewall. But we have to be quick. Julian nodded, his heart hammering in his chest. Let's do it. We can't let Elon win. They descended another flight of stairs, and as they reached the bottom, Julian's eyes adjusted to the low light. The room before them was vast, filled with ancient computers and flickering monitors. This was the heart of NanoHope before it had been upgraded, a relic of a time long past. There it is, Dr. Patel said, pointing to the central terminal. We can access the backup systems from there. But as they moved closer, Julian felt a cold chill in the air. He stopped, his instinct screaming at him. Something wasn't right. The sound of the agents grew louder. They were almost there. And then, with a loud crash, the door behind them slammed open. Too late, a voice said from the shadows. Julian froze, his blood running cold. It was the agent from the server room, the one who had been watching them earlier. His eyes gleamed in the dim light. Now, he said, with a smile that sent shivers down Julian's spine. The metallic clang of the door slamming open reverberated through the underground control room, and Julian's heart skipped a beat. His eyes locked onto the agent standing in the doorway, his expression smug and confident. The agent was flanked by two more, both armed and wearing black tactical gear. They had no intention of letting Julian and Dr. Patel escape. Julian's mind raced, calculating the odds. The room was vast, but the old systems weren't designed for combat situations. It was a maze of outdated equipment, cables, and exposed wiring. It wasn't ideal, but it might just give them the edge they needed. Dr. Patel, however, was already moving. We need to get to the terminal, she whispered urgently, her eyes scanning the room. We can still access the backup system if we're fast. The agents took a step forward, weapons raised. The one leading them, Julian recognized him from the server room, smiled cruelly. There's no point in running. You've already lost. Julian clenched his fists. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. He could feel the weight of the seconds pressing on him, each one ticking by faster than the last. They had to act now. Get to the terminal, Julian shouted, turning toward Dr. Patel and pushing her forward. With a swift motion, Dr. Patel sprinted toward the central terminal. Julian followed closely behind, but as they neared the system, the agents closed in on them. They were outnumbered, and the weapons aimed at them only made the tension in the room thicker. Just then, a faint beep echoed through the room, followed by a soft hum. Julian's eyes darted toward the old console, and a smile spread across his face. The backup system's still functional, Dr. Patel breathed, fingers already flying across the keyboard. I can bypass the firewall. We just need a few more seconds. Julian turned to face the agents, positioning himself between them and Dr. Patel. His heart raced, but he knew he couldn't let the agents get any closer. Every moment they wasted could be the difference between life and death. The agent at the front, the one with the cold smile, sneered at Julian. You really think you can stop us? His voice was dripping with condescension. Julian didn't answer. Instead, he moved toward the closest piece of equipment, a large server rack. He yanked it out of place, using it as a shield. It wasn't much, but it would give them some time. The agent laughed, but his eyes flickered with annoyance. You're pathetic, he said, signaling for his team to move in. Julian braced himself, ready to fight. But as the agents advanced, the unexpected happened. The lights in the room flickered, followed by a loud crash that shook the walls. The power grid seemed to short-circuit, and suddenly, the entire room plunged into darkness. For a split second, everything was silent. Julian's pulse pounded in his ears, and he instinctively crouched, straining his eyes to see through the thick darkness. What just happened? Dr. Patel's voice was barely a whisper, but it was filled with urgency. Something's wrong, Julian muttered, his eyes trying to adjust to the lack of light. The darkness was thick, impenetrable. He could hear the agents shouting, their voices tinged with frustration as they scrambled in confusion. Before Julian could react, a series of beeping sounds came from the terminal. Dr. Patel's voice broke through the chaos, her tone tense but focused. I've got it, just a little longer. Julian moved to cover her, scanning the shadows for any movement. His senses were on high alert now. He couldn't afford to take his eyes off the agents. But with the power out, the room felt like a labyrinth of blind corners and hidden dangers. The agent with the cold smile cursed under his breath. They're trying to reboot the system, he barked to his team. Find them now. Julian could hear the agents moving closer, their footsteps quick and calculated. The sound of metal clanging against metal as they searched the room sent a chill down his spine. He gritted his teeth, determined to protect Dr. Patel at all costs. Almost there, Dr. Patel murmured, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I just need to break through this last layer. The seconds felt like hours as Julian crouched behind the server rack, his muscles coiled and ready to spring into action. His mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. But there was no time. They either succeeded here, or they'd fail. Finally, the beeping stopped. Dr. Patel's voice cut through the tension. Got it. The lights flickered back on, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the room was fully illuminated. The agents froze, their eyes wide with shock as the terminal in front of Dr. Patel displayed a message. Access granted. But before Julian could relax, something else appeared on the screen. Upload complete. No, Julian whispered in horror. It's too late. Dr. Patel's face fell as she stared at the message. They've already uploaded the code. Julian's stomach twisted. They had failed. But the agent's smug expression faltered as he stepped forward. You think you've won? His voice was cold, but there was something else there. Something Julian couldn't place. What do you mean? Julian asked, his voice tight with disbelief. The agent smiled. You've just activated the failsafe protocol. The code you think you stopped? It's already in the system. There's no going back now. The words hit Julian like a punch to the gut. Everything they had worked for, every moment of struggle, had been for nothing. It was over. But as the agents moved in to seize them, the room suddenly went silent. Julian and Dr. Patel exchanged a glance. There was something in the agent's eyes, a glint of uncertainty. Wait, Julian said, a new thought dawning on him. You've made a mistake. The agent paused, his smirk faltering. What are you talking about? Julian took a step forward. You think you've won? What if this system wasn't just about stopping the upload? What if there was something more you missed? The agent's confusion was palpable. What are you trying to say? Before Julian could respond, the emergency alarms blared, shaking the room with their deafening shrill. Red lights flashed overhead, and the ground seemed to tremble beneath them. It wasn't over yet. The screeching wail of the alarms reverberated through the underground facility, shaking Julian to his core. The red emergency lights blinked erratically, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The ground vibrated as if the entire complex was on the verge of collapse. He barely registered Dr. Patel's hand on his shoulder, pulling him back toward the terminal. Julian, we need to move now, she shouted over the sound of the alarms, her voice trembling with urgency. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, suffocating him. His mind was racing. The failsafe code had already been uploaded. The agents were closing in. Every moment they wasted was another step closer to their doom. But as he turned to face Dr. Patel, something caught his eye. A flash on the terminal screen, just for a split second, showed a different message. Critical error. System override detected. What? Julian's voice faltered. Did you see that? Dr. Patel leaned in, eyes scanning the screen. It's a glitch. No, wait. It's not a glitch. It's an override. Her fingers flew over the keyboard again, trying to dig deeper into the system. Julian's pulse quickened. Was there still hope? Could they still stop this? Julian, listen, Dr. Patel said, her voice suddenly softer, more focused. This override is triggering a failsafe of its own. Someone else is intervening. The system's been hijacked. The words hung in the air, too surreal to comprehend. Someone else? But who? Before Julian could respond, the agent who had been leading the team, the one with the cold smile, stepped forward. His eyes were narrowed, the smugness replaced by a flicker of panic. He wasn't just annoyed anymore. He was rattled. "What's going on here?" the agent barked, his tone tight. "The system's supposed to be ours. How is this happening?" Julian took a step forward, trying to buy time, his thoughts racing. "You don't understand. This wasn't just about you. It's bigger than you could have ever imagined. Someone else is in control now." The agent's jaw clenched, his expression darkening. "You're lying. You've got no leverage left. The system's ours, and we're ending this right now." But Julian wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were fixed on the terminal, the screen flashing faster now as the override code took effect. A string of words appeared, too fast for him to read fully, but he caught one vital phrase: "User access granted." "Dr. Patel." Julian's voice cracked with urgency. "What does that mean? Who's granting access?" She didn't answer immediately. Her fingers flew across the keys, each press making the tension in the air heavier. Then, after a moment that felt like an eternity, she stopped, staring at the screen with wide eyes. "No," she whispered, the color draining from her face. "No, it can't be." "What? What is it?" Julian demanded, his heart racing. Dr. Patel slowly turned to face him. "It's Elon Musk." The words hit Julian like a thunderbolt. Elon Musk? How could that be? He had no idea how Musk could even have access to this facility, unless— The agent sneered, sensing their confusion. "Oh, you don't get it, do you? You think Musk is your savior? He's the one who set all of this up. The override is his." Julian's head spun. The realization was beginning to hit him, but the pieces weren't quite fitting together. Elon Musk had known about this all along? But before he could ask another question, the entire facility jolted. The alarms died down, and the red lights stopped flashing. A low, vibrating hum filled the room, followed by the soft click of the door behind them opening. The agent's eyes widened. "No, no, no, no," he muttered, his voice shaking with disbelief. He turned and sprinted toward the door, but before he could make it through, a figure stepped in. Julian's breath caught in his throat as the figure emerged from the shadows. Standing tall, dressed in a sleek, dark suit with an air of authority, was none other than Elon Musk himself. "Well, this is quite the scene," Musk said with a bemused smile, his eyes scanning the room. "I hope I didn't miss the fun." Julian's mind was reeling. "Musk? Here? Now?" "Mr. Musk," the agent said, his voice strained. "What the hell is going on? This was supposed to be our operation." Musk didn't even glance at him. "Your operation? I'm afraid you've got it all wrong. This was never your operation. It was always mine." Julian's confusion deepened, and he took a step forward. "But why? Why would you?" Musk raised a hand to silence him, his expression shifting from amusement to something colder, more calculating. "You see, Julian, it was never about stopping the upload. It was never about stopping you. It was about control. I needed to make sure the system was in the right hands." "The right hands?" Julian echoed, his voice trembling with disbelief. "What do you mean?" Musk's smile was sharp, predatory. "You're not the only one who's trying to change the world. But unlike you, I understand the importance of immortality. I've been working on something far bigger than this little project of yours." Suddenly, everything clicked. The code, the failsafe, the hijack, it was all part of Musk's plan. He hadn't just wanted to stop Julian. He had been pulling the strings from the very beginning, playing a long game to get access to the one thing that could make him immortal, the system. Musk looked at Dr. Patel, his eyes narrowing. "And you, Dr. Patel, you've been a useful pawn. But now, I don't need you anymore." Dr. Patel stepped back, her face pale. "No, this wasn't part of the plan. You can't." Musk turned away, his voice suddenly colder. You've served your purpose. Now, it's time for you to go. Julian's heart raced, and in that moment, he knew they were no longer in control. The game had changed. Musk turned toward the agent, his demeanor chilling. You were never meant to be a part of this, but I'll make sure you're taken care of. The agent's face twisted with rage. You think you've won, Musk? We'll stop you. We'll. Musk held up a hand, and the agent froze. His eyes glazed over for a moment. The silence in the room deepened, as if the very air had thickened. Then, without a word, the agent collapsed to the ground. Julian's blood ran cold as he realized what had just happened. Musk had controlled him. He had used some kind of mind-altering tech. Elon Musk turned back to face them, his smile now a twisted reflection of triumph. It's over, Julian. There's nothing you can do. The world will belong to me now. The air in the room felt thick, oppressive, as though every breath Julian took was heavier than the last. The cold metallic walls seemed to close in around him. He looked at Musk, standing tall, exuding an unsettling calm, as if he had already won. Musk's expression was that of a man who had orchestrated his own victory, playing everyone, Julian, Dr. Patel, and the agents, like pawns in a game he had already decided. Julian's mind was reeling, struggling to comprehend the extent of the betrayal. You knew, Julian said hoarsely, his voice laced with disbelief. You knew all along. This was never about stopping the upload. It was about you gaining control. Musk's eyes glittered with cold amusement. Exactly. You're not the first genius to think they could change the world, Julian. But you're missing the bigger picture. You've been too focused on saving the system. But I'm focused on something far more important, immortality. Dr. Patel stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. Immortality? You're insane, Musk. You can't control the future like that. This isn't just about power. It's about manipulating the very essence of life itself. Musk chuckled, unfazed by her words. And what is life but a series of equations? A set of variables waiting to be solved? I've built something beyond what your little system could ever achieve. I've cracked the code to eternal life. Julian's heart pounded as the weight of Musk's words sank in. He had always known Musk was an ambitious man, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. You've already started the process, haven't you? Julian whispered, his stomach sinking. You've been using the system to gather data, to build your immortality protocol. Musk didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled, the kind of smile that made Julian's blood run cold. I have. And now that I have full access to the system, it's only a matter of time before I activate the final phase. Your little project was just a stepping stone. I'll use the data to create something much bigger. Dr. Patel's face paled. You're not going to stop at immortality, are you? You're going to control everything? Musk didn't even flinch. Of course. What use is immortality if I can't control the world around me? You think I built this company to change the world for the better? No. I built it to reshape it, to bend it to my will. And now, with the immortality protocol, I'll ensure that I stay at the top forever. Julian felt a surge of panic, but also a flicker of hope. We can still stop you. We can shut down the system before you activate it. We can stop you from taking control. Musk raised an eyebrow, as if entertained by Julian's persistence. You think you can shut it down? The system is already in place. You can't stop it now. The only thing you can do is watch as I reshape everything. Julian's mind raced. He couldn't just give up. There had to be a way to outsmart Musk. There had to be a way to stop him before it was too late. But how? Dr. Patel, though shaken, seemed to regain some of her composure. She looked at Julian, a glint of determination returning to her eyes. We still have one shot. The protocol, if we can trace the override signal, we might be able to reverse the process. Julian looked at her, desperate. But how? Musk has everything under control. She shook her head. Not everything. There's a vulnerability in the system. A backdoor I built in case of emergency. It's hidden deep within the code, but I can access it. We might be able to reverse the override if we can get to it in time. Musk's gaze darkened. You really think you can reverse it? You've already lost. It's over. Julian didn't listen to Musk. He had to believe Dr. Patel. They had to try. Without another word, he turned to the terminal, his fingers flying over the keys. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried to hack into the system, searching for that back door, the one hope they had left. Behind him, he could hear Musk's footsteps, the sound of a predator circling its prey. But Julian couldn't stop now. He had to focus. If they didn't act fast, Musk's plans would come to fruition and everything would be lost. Julian, Dr. Patel said, her voice tense, we don't have much time. The system is starting to initiate the final phase. Julian's pulse quickened. He could see the lines of code flashing across the terminal, each one a ticking time bomb. But then, amidst the chaos of the data, he saw it, the back door. With a final surge of energy, he typed in the command that could either save them or doom them forever. The screen flickered, the lights flickered. Musk's smile faltered for just a moment, but then he stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with confidence. You think you've won? Musk asked coldly. It's too late. You've played right into my hands. Julian didn't answer. He just kept typing, each keystroke more desperate than the last. There was no turning back now. Suddenly, the terminal beeped. A red warning flashed across the screen. Override attempt detected. Failsafe activated. Julian's heart sank. He had been too late. Musk had already anticipated their move. No. Dr. Patel cried out. We were so close. Musk laughed, a dark, mocking sound. You're too late. The failsafe is in place. You've lost. But just as he finished speaking, the room shook again. The lights flickered and then went out completely. The silence that followed was deafening. Julian's breath hitched as he realized what had just happened. The failsafe wasn't stopping them. It was stopping Musk. Before anyone could react, a new voice echoed through the facility. I see you've been busy, Mr. Musk. The air crackled with tension, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The silence that had followed the mysterious voice was almost suffocating. Julian's fingers froze on the terminal's keys, his heart pounding in his chest. Dr. Patel's wide eyes scanned the shadows, but there was no sign of anyone. Who's there? Julian's voice broke through the stillness, barely a whisper. The voice, smooth and calm, responded from the darkness. It's not who you think it is, Julian. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to help. Julian's mind raced. Help? Who could be here to help? Musk, who had been so confident moments ago, was now glaring around the room, searching for the source of the voice. Show yourself, Musk growled, his composure cracking for the first time since entering the room. A figure stepped from the shadows, a silhouette against the dim emergency lights now flashing erratically. The person was tall, wearing a dark jacket and a pair of glasses that reflected the faint light. The figure's face was partially obscured, but Julian could tell one thing immediately. This was no ordinary person. You're not just some random player, Julian muttered, his instincts telling him something was off. Who are you? The figure stepped into the light, revealing a face Julian would never have expected to see. Dr. Maria Voss, a renowned scientist who had disappeared several years ago, presumed dead after an explosion in her laboratory. She had been a former colleague of Musk's, but her work was considered too dangerous, even by his standards. Julian's jaw dropped. Dr. Voss? You were supposed to be dead. Maria's lips curled into a faint smile. That's what they told you, didn't they? Her voice was laced with sarcasm. The explosion was no accident, Julian. It was a cover-up. Dr. Patel's eyes widened in disbelief. But why? What happened? Why didn't you come forward? Maria didn't immediately answer. Instead, she moved closer to Julian and the terminal, her eyes scanning the code with a practiced ease. I couldn't. Not until I had everything I needed to undo what Musk is doing. He's played you all, but the game isn't over yet. Julian couldn't make sense of the situation. So, you've been alive this whole time? And you're here to help us stop Musk? Maria nodded, her face serious. I've been watching. I know what Musk is capable of. I know what he's trying to do. But what you don't understand, Julian, is that the system he's building, the Immortality Protocol, it's not just about him. It's about controlling every aspect of human existence. Everything you thought was secure, Everything you thought you could trust is part of his plan. Musk's eyes narrowed. You're lying, he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You've been hiding in the shadows, and now you think you can stop me? You've lost. The system is mine. It always has been. Maria ignored Musk's outburst. You think you're invincible, Elon, but you're not. This isn't just about control. It's about what happens when you don't have a soul anymore. When you live forever, but lose your humanity. That's what you're forgetting. You can't manipulate life the way you think you can. Julian stepped closer to Maria, his confusion still evident on his face. How do we stop him? Can we really undo the protocol? You said you've been watching. What's the next move? Maria took a deep breath, her eyes focused on the terminal. The next move is to stop Musk from triggering the final phase. The backdoor you were looking for, it's a temporary solution. It wasn't built to withstand the full force of Musk's plan. But there's something else, something Musk doesn't know about. She paused for a moment, then added, I've created a failsafe of my own. A countermeasure. Julian's mind whirled. A countermeasure? You can override Musk's system? Maria nodded. Yes, but it's not simple. I'll need your help, both of you. You have the knowledge, Julian, to understand what I've created. And Dr. Patel, you know the system's core better than anyone. Together, we can shut it down? Musk's expression twisted with fury. You think you can outsmart me? You're all fools. This is my world now. Julian looked at Dr. Patel, who nodded solemnly. They didn't have much time, and they certainly couldn't afford to waste it arguing with Musk. They had to act, and fast. Maria's fingers flew across the terminal, her movements swift and precise. Julian, you need to upload the secondary protocol. The one I designed before I vanished. It's the only way to reset the system from within. Julian didn't hesitate. He tapped into the system, his fingers flying over the keys as he initiated the upload. His heart raced as he watched the lines of code blink on the screen, each line a step closer to undoing Musk's grip on the system. But even as he worked, he could feel Musk's eyes burning into him, the tension palpable. You think you can do this? You can't stop me, Musk repeated. But his voice held a tremor of uncertainty now, as if he were beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. The terminal beeped, and the upload process began to run its course. But just as Julian thought they might have a chance, the system flickered. A red warning flashed across the screen. Critical error. Unauthorized override detected. Maria cursed under her breath. It's not going to be that easy. Musk has built multiple layers of defense into the system. We need to break through each one. Musk's face twisted into a sneer. You're too late. It's already begun. Julian's heart sank, but he didn't stop. There had to be a way. How do we bypass it, Maria? She looked at him, her eyes intense. We force the system to accept our commands by using a feedback loop. It's dangerous, but it'll give us the access we need. Julian nodded, steeling himself. He didn't care how dangerous it was. They had no choice. As the countdown to the final phase began, Julian and Maria worked in unison, typing commands as the screen flickered again. Time was running out. Would they succeed in stopping Musk, or had they waited too long? The room seemed to close in around Julian, Maria, and Dr. Patel as the red warning light flashed menacingly on the terminal. Every second felt like an eternity. Julian's pulse raced, and he could hear the blood thumping in his ears. The system is about to activate. We're running out of time. Maria's fingers moved with lightning speed over the terminal, her face a mask of concentration. I need access to the root directory, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. If we can inject the override code here, it'll force the system to restart, giving us a chance to stop Musk. Julian swallowed hard. You're sure this will work? What if the system doesn't accept the code? Maria shot him a glance, her eyes sharp and resolute. There's no other way. If we don't do this, it's over. Musk wins. Musk, who had been standing to the side, pacing like a caged animal, finally stopped. His eyes flicked from the terminal to the group of them. You think you're going to save the world, but you're just delaying the inevitable. My immortality project is unstoppable. Even if you shut me down, someone else will take my place. You can't win. His words dripped with venom, but there was a tremor in his voice. a hint of desperation that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just the fear of losing power. It was something deeper, something Julian couldn't quite place. Maria didn't respond. Her eyes never left the terminal. "Julian," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos, "I need you to enter the override code. Now." He nodded, steeling himself. It was all up to him now. He stepped up to the terminal and hesitated for a brief moment. Was he really about to destroy everything Musk had built? Everything he had worked for? But then he thought of the countless lives at risk, of the future that could be rewritten. It was a small price to pay for the hope of a better world. Taking a deep breath, Julian typed in the long string of characters Maria had given him. The code was a masterpiece, elegant, precise, and dangerous. It would either work or trigger a catastrophic chain reaction. As he hit enter, the terminal screen blinked twice, then flashed a new message: authentication pending. A soft sigh of relief passed through the room, but Maria's expression didn't change. "It's not over yet," she said. "We've bypassed the first layer of defense, but there's still the core system to deal with. Musk built it to be nearly indestructible." Musk laughed bitterly. "You're wasting your time. The more you try to fight me, the more I win. You don't have the resources to outsmart me." He strode toward the terminal, but Dr. Patel stepped in his way, his expression grim. "You can't stop us now, Elon. The system is ours to control." Musk's eyes blazed with fury. "You think I'm the only one with resources? I've anticipated your every move. You're nothing but pawns in a game you can't even begin to understand." Before anyone could respond, the terminal beeped again, louder this time. The words on the screen changed. "Security breach detected. Countermeasures activated." Julian's stomach dropped. "No." Maria's fingers flew over the keys again. "I knew he'd anticipate this. The core system is more complicated than we thought, but we still have a chance. I just need..." But before she could finish, the terminal flashed a new message: critical error. Immediate system shutdown. The lights in the room flickered violently, and the ground beneath their feet trembled as though the building itself was reacting to the threat. The walls seemed to pulse with an ominous hum, and then, just as quickly as it had started, the trembling stopped. The room was plunged into an eerie silence. Julian's breath came in short gasps. What just happened? Dr. Patel's face was pale, and his eyes were wide with disbelief. "The system, it's shutting down. We didn't do that. It's not our doing." Maria's hands stilled over the keyboard. "It's the failsafe," she whispered. "Musk didn't know about it, but I built it into the system years ago. It's activated. It's trying to shut everything down to prevent the full protocol from being executed." Musk took a step back, his eyes widening. For the first time, there was fear in his gaze. What did you do?" Maria's lips curled into a knowing smile. "You underestimated me, Elon. The failsafe wasn't just for you. It was for the entire project. If anyone tried to hack or override the system, it would automatically initiate a shutdown, rendering the Immortality protocol useless." Musk took another step back, the anger on his face melting into something far more dangerous: panic. "You can't stop me. This is just a temporary glitch." Maria shook her head. "No, Elon. It's over. You can't control the system anymore. It's beyond your reach." A moment of quiet stretched between them, and then the terminal beeped one last time. The words that appeared on the screen were simple but final: system deactivated. All protocols terminated. Musk's face turned ashen. No, you can't do this. This is my life's work." His voice rose to a shout, but it was clear to everyone in the room that he knew the battle was lost. Maria turned to Julian and Dr. Patel, her expression weary but triumphant. "It's done. We've stopped him." Julian could hardly believe what he was hearing. It was over. Musk's Immortality project, the very thing he had built his empire on, was nothing more than a failed dream now. But as the reality of their victory began to sink in, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Musk may have lost this round, but the world he had created, one built on ambition, power, and the relentless pursuit of immortality, was far from gone. The question was, what would come next? The dust was still settling from the monumental shutdown. The air in the control room felt thick with the weight of what had just transpired. Julian stood frozen for a moment, staring at the now empty terminal screen, as if expecting it to light up with some new crisis or challenge. But it remained black and lifeless, the hum of the machinery gone. Maria exhaled a long breath, her hands shaking slightly as she pushed her hair back from her face. "We did it," she said softly, though her voice lacked the triumphant tone it had moments earlier. "We actually did it." But Julian didn't feel victorious. Instead, an unsettling feeling had settled in his chest. The battle against Musk might be over, but the war, the long-term consequences of what had just happened, was only beginning. "Is it really over?" Julian asked, his voice tight with doubt. "I mean, Musk's power, his influence, it was built on so much more than just this project. What happens now?" Maria turned to him, her expression solemn. "You're right. The damage he's caused, the lives he's changed forever. It's not something we can just undo with a keystroke. But this was the first step. We've crippled his empire. We've stopped the Immortality project. That's huge." Dr. Patel stepped forward, his eyes sharp as he surveyed the room. "We can't afford to think of this as a simple win. We need to plan the next phase, and we need to do it fast. Musk will find a way to adapt, to rebuild. We have to keep moving." Julian nodded, trying to shake off the heaviness in his mind. "So what now? We stop him completely? Take down everything he's built?" Maria gave him a thoughtful look. "It's not that simple. Musk's technology and influence span far beyond this one project. We need to make sure we don't just destroy his work. We need to rebuild what's been lost," Dr. Patel interrupted, finishing her thought. "The truth is, Musk's pursuit of immortality wasn't entirely wrong. He wasn't just trying to save himself. He was trying to change the world. But he lost sight of what truly matters. What we do next will shape the future. We need to reframe this, not as a battle to defeat him, but as a chance to create something better." The weight of Dr. Patel's words settled heavily in the room. Julian couldn't help but think of the millions of lives Musk had impacted with his work. For all of Musk's arrogance, for all of his faults, he had been striving to achieve something beyond himself, even if it had been misguided. But how? Julian's voice cracked slightly, the uncertainty overwhelming him. How do we rebuild? Musk has already set a dangerous precedent. He created a world where people believed immortality was within reach, where power and wealth could be used to control life itself. Maria stood still, staring out the window, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "The first thing we need to do is ensure the technology he created doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The second thing we need to do is offer the world something else, a vision of what the future could look like without that temptation. A world where humanity is not just chasing immortality, but living with purpose." "You're right," Julian said slowly, feeling a flicker of hope rise in his chest. "We can't ignore the lessons from what Musk tried to do, but we can build a better way forward. A world that's not based on escaping death, but on making life worth living." Dr. Patel nodded. "Exactly. We start by dismantling the systems Musk put in place. Then we'll find ways to use the technology for good, to make real, lasting improvements in healthcare, education, and society." Maria turned back to face them. "We have to act fast. Musk may be temporarily sidelined, but he's not going down without a fight. We need to prepare for the next phase of this war, whatever it may be." The room fell silent for a moment, as the enormity of their task sank in. Julian looked at Maria and Dr. Patel, both of them tired but determined. This was no longer just a battle against Musk. It was a battle for the future of humanity itself. "All right," Julian said, his voice steady now. "We rebuild. We take what we've learned from this, and we make it our mission to do better. We fix the mistakes. And we make sure that no one ever has the power Musk had again." Maria smiled faintly, the exhaustion still etched on her face. "It's not going to be easy, but we've taken the first step. The road ahead will be tough, but at least we have a chance to do it right." Dr. Patel placed a hand on Julian's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance. "One step at a time. Together, we'll make it happen." Julian sat alone in the dimly lit conference room, his mind racing. The victory over Musk had been monumental, but it was fleeting. The sense of accomplishment they'd felt just hours ago now seemed hollow. As much as they had dismantled his plans, Julian couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were only scratching the surface of something far deeper and more dangerous. The door creaked open, and Maria stepped inside, her face serious. She didn't need to say anything for Julian to know something was wrong. "You've been up for hours. I can see it in your eyes," she said softly, sitting down across from him. "What's going on?" Julian exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I can't stop thinking about what Dr. Patel said earlier. Musk's technology may have been flawed, but it wasn't all bad. There's a way to use it for good, if we can control it. But someone's going to try to take it for themselves, Maria. I can feel it." Maria leaned back, considering his words carefully. "You think there's someone else involved? Someone behind the scenes?" Julian nodded, his gaze distant. "I can't prove it, but there's something off. When we took down Musk's project, the immediate fallout felt almost too clean, too perfect. It doesn't add up." A chill ran down Maria's spine. "So, what? You think someone else was pulling the strings? Maybe Musk wasn't the mastermind after all?" Julian didn't respond immediately, but instead, he pushed aside a stack of papers on the table, revealing a series of encrypted files they had recently uncovered in the remnants of Musk servers. These files contained highly classified information about a backup project, one that Julian hadn't seen before. "We missed something," Julian said quietly. "There's another layer to this. This backup project, it's not just a backup. It's a continuation of Musk's work, a secret initiative. We need to find out who else is involved." Maria's brow furrowed as she scanned the documents. "This isn't just tech. It looks like it's part of some kind of underground network." Julian could see the realization dawn on her face. Exactly. Musk may be temporarily out of the picture, but his ideas and his resources are still alive. Someone else is using them to further their own agenda. Maria leaned forward, her voice low. "We have to stop them. Whatever they're planning, we need to know what it is before it's too late." Just as she finished speaking, the door opened again. Dr. Patel entered, his expression grim. "I've been reviewing the same files," he said, his voice calm but with a certain urgency. "We've been operating under the assumption that Musk was the sole player in this game. But there are others. The question is, who?" Julian looked up at him. "Do you have any leads?" Dr. Patel shook his head. "Nothing concrete yet. But there's one person I think we need to watch very carefully, someone with the resources and the ideology to continue Musk's work." "Who?" Maria asked, the tension in her voice rising. "Zara Wolf," Dr. Patel replied. The name hit Julian like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly who Zara Wolf was. The enigmatic billionaire scientist who had long been rumored to be a rival to Musk. Zara had disappeared from the public eye years ago, but whispers had circulated about her involvement in advanced AI research and quantum computing. Some said she had been an unsung co-architect of Musk's earliest projects, but her name had never been publicly linked to his immortality pursuits. Julian felt the weight of the moment. If Zara Wolf was behind this, they were dealing with a formidable opponent, a shadowy figure who had remained out of the limelight for so long. "We can't afford to underestimate her," Julian said, his voice steely. "She's dangerous, but we don't have much time before she makes her move." Dr. Patel nodded. "We need to find out everything we can about her, her connections, her financial backing, any loose ends from Musk's work that might have been handed off to her." Maria stood up, determination in her eyes. "We'll need a plan, a real plan, not just to stop her, but to expose everything she's done." Julian felt a surge of resolve. "We go after her network first. We find where the money is flowing and who's supporting her. That's our way in." The three of them exchanged a look, understanding that this was no longer just about stopping one man's dream of immortality. It was about a much larger fight, one that would determine the future of technology and humanity. Julian sat at the head of the table, his eyes focused on the screen in front of him. The encrypted message had been brief, but its implications were clear. Zara Wolf was already 3 steps ahead. The message was a single line of text. "You've only seen the beginning." The words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder of the stakes they were facing. Zara Wolf had been operating in the shadows for years, building her own empire in secret. It was clear now that she was using Musk's legacy as a stepping stone. But to what end? Beside him, Maria and Dr. Patel exchanged uneasy glances. They knew that this wasn't just a fight for the future of technology anymore. It was a race to prevent the wrong hands from controlling the future itself. "We need to get to her before she gets to us," Maria said, breaking the silence. "We've already been compromised once by Musk's network. We can't afford another misstep." Dr. Patel's fingers tapped nervously on the table. "We can track her financial transactions, but her movements are encrypted, hidden within layers of firewalls and corporate proxies. She's good at this, better than Musk was." Julian's gaze hardened. "Then we go after her connections. We start small, disrupt her operations, and force her to make a mistake." Maria nodded. "I have a few contacts who might know her more intimately. There's a chance we could get a lead from one of them. But they're going to want something in return." Julian didn't hesitate. "Whatever it takes. We can't wait for her to make the first move. We've already been playing defense for too long." The team spent the next few days laying low, gathering what little intelligence they could on Zara Wolf. Her empire was vast, and she had a network of loyalists who would stop at nothing to protect her interests. They were going to have to break through layers of deception, and that meant risking everything. Maria's contact, a former associate of Zara's, agreed to meet with them in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. Julian didn't trust the place. It felt too exposed, too easily surveilled. But they didn't have a choice. This could be their only lead. They arrived early, taking seats in a corner booth where they had a clear view of the entrance. Julian's heart raced, but he kept his expression neutral. This was the calm before the storm. At exactly 10:15 a.m., a tall woman with dark hair and sharp features entered the cafe. Her eyes scanned the room before settling on Julian and Maria. She didn't look like someone who needed to make an entrance. Her presence was commanding enough that people subconsciously moved out of her way. "Ms. Turner," the woman greeted, her voice low but with an edge that immediately put Julian on alert. "I wasn't sure you would come. You've always been difficult to read." Maria stood and nodded. "Ms. Anderson, I don't have time for pleasantries. We need information on Zara Wolf. Your relationship with her is the only leverage we have." Ms. Anderson raised an eyebrow. "You're playing a dangerous game. Zara doesn't forgive people who cross her, or who get too close to her secrets." Julian leaned forward. "We don't have time for threats. We need to know how she operates, where she's hiding, and who's helping her. We can't let her complete whatever she's planning." Ms. Anderson hesitated for a moment, studying them carefully. "You think Musk was the problem?" "No, Zara has bigger plans than anything Musk could dream of, and she's very close to executing them." "How close?" Julian asked, his voice tight with urgency. Ms. Anderson lowered her voice even further, as if speaking of a forbidden truth. "Her project isn't just about immortality, it's about control. She wants to create a new form of consciousness, a collective mind that transcends the human condition. She's not interested in saving lives, Julian. She's trying to control them." The words hit Julian like a cold wave. A collective mind? Transcending humanity? It sounded like something out of a dystopian novel, not reality. Maria's voice broke the silence. "And how does she plan to do this?" Ms. Anderson leaned in, her expression suddenly very serious. "Through a neural interface. She's been working on it for years, using the remnants of Musk's technology and enhancing it with her own breakthroughs. It's dangerous, Julian. She plans to upload human consciousness into a vast digital network. A hive mind where every thought, every action, every decision is controlled, not by individuals, but by her." The room seemed to close in around Julian. He couldn't breathe. The implications were terrifying. "Where is she now?" Maria demanded, her voice sharp. "How do we stop her?" Miss Anderson paused, clearly weighing her options. "You don't. At this point, it's too late. Zara's already ahead of you. She's already laid the groundwork for her plan. There's no stopping it. She's untouchable." Julian's mind raced. This wasn't just a battle against a scientist with dangerous technology. This was a fight for the very essence of humanity. The cafe felt colder now. The weight of Ms. Anderson's words hung heavily over Julian and Maria, settling like a dark cloud in their minds. A collective mind, a digital network controlling human consciousness, was beyond anything they had anticipated. They had come to stop Zara Wolf, but now they found themselves battling a force much more powerful than a single person's ambition. This wasn't just about taking down a rogue scientist. It was about preventing the very nature of humanity from being altered forever. As Julian's mind raced, trying to process the information, his phone buzzed. The sudden vibration pulled him out of his thoughts. He pulled it from his pocket and saw the notification. New message from Elon Musk. His stomach twisted. Musk had been silent for days, leaving Julian and his team to work without his guidance. Musk was the key to everything, but Julian had been growing more and more skeptical of his role in this. Now, an unexpected message arrived, and with it, an even more troubling thought. Could Musk have been playing them all along? Julian tapped the screen, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the message. Julian, the message began, written in Musk's familiar tone. If you're reading this, you're too late. Zara's plan is already in motion, and the technology she's using? It was mine first. Don't try to stop her. She's already embedded herself into the system. Everything you've been doing, every move you've made, has been part of her design. The only way to stop her now is to destroy the core of the project, and that's something only I can do. If you want to live, if you want any hope for the future, you need to listen to me. Meet me at the coordinates I'm sending you. A map pinged to the phone with a set of coordinates. Julian stared at the screen in disbelief. Was Musk really warning them? Or was this just another game? Was he part of the plan all along? Or was this an attempt to regain control over his own creations? Maria leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning the message quickly. What is it? Julian didn't answer right away. He simply stared at the coordinates. Musk had given them no context, no explanation. Just a cryptic message that left more questions than answers. I think he's offering us a chance, Julian finally said. His voice steady despite the torrent of uncertainty swirling in his mind. But I don't trust him. Not anymore. Maria's eyes narrowed, and she leaned back in her chair. Musk has always been unpredictable. If he says it's our only chance, though, we might not have a choice. We have to at least check it out. Dr. Patel, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. We can't afford to make another mistake. This might be a trap, but it might also be our only lead. Julian looked between Maria and Dr. Patel. They were both right. If they were going to stop Zara Wolf, they needed to know what Musk was planning. Even if he had been part of Zara's game all along, this could be their chance to stop it. I'll go, Julian said finally. You two stay here. Keep tracking Zara. I'll meet Musk and find out what's really going on. Maria and Dr. Patel nodded in agreement, though the unease in their expressions remained. They both knew the risks of following Musk's instructions, but the alternative was worse. The coordinates led them to an industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, an area that looked abandoned, its tall fences and broken windows giving it a ghostly feel. Julian parked the car and turned to the others. Stay here, he said. I'll go alone. You sure about this? Maria asked, her voice tinged with concern. Julian nodded, a hard expression on his face. This is the only chance we have. I'll be fine. He stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance of the complex, his footsteps echoing in the empty street. The air was thick with the smell of oil and rust, and the faint hum of machinery could be heard in the distance. Julian didn't know what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever Musk had planned, it wasn't going to be easy. He approached a small, locked door near the side of the building, the one marked with a single glowing red light above it. Julian had a sinking feeling that this was where things would either end or begin. He reached for the door handle and hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he twisted it open. Inside, the dim light illuminated a series of screens and monitors. And sitting at a desk in the center of the room was Elon Musk, his face illuminated by the cold glow of the technology around him. Julian, Musk said, his voice calm but tinged with an edge that Julian couldn't quite place. I knew you'd come. Julian stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. What's going on, Musk? Are you part of Zara's plan? Or are you trying to stop her? Musk smiled, a strange, almost sad expression on his face. I've been trying to stop her for years, but I underestimated how far she'd take it. Zara's vision is beyond anything I ever thought possible. She's going to reshape humanity, but she's doing it wrong. Julian's mind raced. What do you mean wrong? You've been creating the technology she's using. You're just as guilty as she is. Musk shook his head slowly. I created the technology to help humanity, Julian, not control it. Zara is using it to dominate people's minds. She wants to create a digital hive where no one is truly free. She's using my own work against me. Julian's stomach twisted at the realization. So why didn't you tell us this before? Why didn't you warn us? Musk looked away, his expression haunted. I didn't have a choice. Zara's influence runs deep. And now it's too late. The only way to stop her is to destroy the core of her network. But I need your help to do it. Julian's heart pounded. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Musk, the man who had built the future, was now asking for his help to destroy it? Where is this core? Julian asked, his voice urgent. Musk turned toward one of the monitors, typing quickly. It's located in a facility just outside the city. I can send you the coordinates, but you'll have to act fast. Zara knows you're coming. She's already preparing for her next move. The sirens blared in the background as the red lights flashed, casting an ominous glow over the room. Julian's heart raced as he stared at Elon Musk, the weight of the situation finally hitting him. Zara Wolf had known they were coming. She was ready for them, and the clock was ticking. There was no time to waste. Musk, his fingers trembling slightly, typed furiously on the computer. The coordinates are sent. You need to move now, Julian. This is it. The core is in a facility just outside the city. If you get there before Zara, you can destroy it. If not, he didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. If they failed, everything was lost. Julian's mind was spinning. He had trusted Musk, but could he really trust him now? Was this truly the end of Zara's plan? Or was Musk simply maneuvering for control once again? The entire situation felt like a game, one in which the stakes were far too high for anyone to truly comprehend. You're sure about this? Julian asked, his voice steady despite the growing panic in his chest. You're not setting me up, right? Musk met his gaze, his expression grim but sincere. If you don't stop Zara, there won't be a me or you left to trick. She'll control everything. There's no time for second guesses. Julian nodded. He didn't have the luxury of doubt. He had to trust Musk, at least for now. He grabbed his phone and checked the coordinates that had been sent, his mind briefly flashing to Maria and Dr. Patel, who were waiting for him, trusting him to come back with the answers they needed. Let's go, Julian said, steeling himself for what was to come. Outside, the cold night air hit him like a slap in the face as he rushed toward the car. He slammed the door shut, started the engine, and sped off toward the coordinates Musk had provided. Every moment felt like it was stretching on forever, as though time itself was playing a cruel trick on him. Zara was closing in, and if he didn't act fast, they'd all be too late. As he sped through the darkened streets, the towering buildings around him blurred in a streak of light. The city felt empty, unusually quiet, like the calm before a storm. The roads were eerily deserted, and the hum of the engine was the only sound in the silence. The facility Musk had directed him to was on the outskirts of the city, nestled among abandoned factories and warehouses. The air felt thick with tension as Julian approached the complex, its security gates ominously shut. It was the perfect place for a secret operation, a place where no one would dare to look. Julian parked the car and quickly stepped out, scanning the area. The faint hum of electricity in the air suggested the facility was still running, despite its outwardly desolate appearance. He knew the core of Zara's network had to be close, hidden deep within this maze of technology and infrastructure. He approached the entrance cautiously, checking his phone for any new messages or alerts. There was nothing. He was alone, but he knew better than to believe that. Zara's forces could be anywhere, and they were watching. Just as he reached the door, it slid open with a mechanical hiss, revealing a long hallway bathed in flickering fluorescent light. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the cold concrete floor as he moved forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the hum of the building's ventilation system. Suddenly, the sound of movement reached his ears. He froze. It was faint, but there was no mistaking it. Footsteps, faint but deliberate, echoing down the hallway. He quickly ducked behind a metal column, holding his breath as the footsteps grew louder. His pulse quickened. Was it Zara's agents? Had she gotten here before him? A shadow passed by, and Julian quickly peeked out from behind the column. To his relief, it wasn't Zara's forces. It was one of Musk's trusted operatives, a woman named Lara, who had been in charge of securing the facility. She looked around nervously before spotting Julian. "Julian," Lara whispered urgently. "You need to move quickly. They're already inside. Zara's people are close. We've got a few minutes before they lock this place down." Julian nodded, his mind racing. He had to find the core before Zara's people did. If he could get there first, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Lara led him through the maze of corridors, her steps sure and confident despite the tension in the air. As they approached a large steel door at the end of the hallway, she stopped. "This is it," she said, looking back at Julian. "The core is beyond this door. But be careful, Zara's team is already inside. If you don't destroy it in time, they'll activate the system and everything will be lost." Julian nodded grimly. "I understand." He reached for the door, his hand shaking slightly. With one final glance at Lara, he pushed the door open. Inside, the room was filled with rows of humming servers, their lights blinking in rhythm as they powered the network. In the center of the room was a large control panel, its screens flickering with data Julian couldn't quite understand. But he knew one thing for sure: the core of Zara's system was here. If he could destroy it, he could stop her, once and for all. But just as he approached the panel, a voice echoed from the shadows. "You're too late, Julian." Julian spun around to find Zara Wolf herself standing at the far side of the room, a smug smile on her face. She had been waiting for him. "You think you can stop me?" Zara's voice was cold and confident. "You're not the one in control anymore. I've already won." The tension in the air was so thick it felt like it could suffocate them. Julian's heart raced as Zara Wolf slowly approached the control panel, her fingers hovering over the activation switch. The fate of humanity, the entire mission, and everything he had worked for came down to this moment. "You really think you can stop me?" Zara's voice was calm, almost mocking. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous confidence that sent a chill through Julian's spine. "You're too late, Julian. This has all been part of the plan. The core is already connected to a global network. If I activate it now, no one will be able to stop it." Julian felt a surge of fear, but he shoved it aside. He couldn't let her win. Not after everything he had been through. Not after everything the world stood to lose. He had come too far. His mind raced as he analyzed his options. The only thing he knew for sure was that he had to act fast. "I've stopped worse than you, Zara," Julian said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You think this is your victory, but you're wrong. You've underestimated me, and you've underestimated the one thing you can't control: human will." Zara's lips curled into a smile. "Human will? You think that will save you now? You think you can defeat me with hope and blind determination? This isn't a movie, Julian. This is real life. And in real life, there's only one thing that matters: power." She hit a button on the console, and the room lit up with an eerie glow. Julian felt a wave of dread wash over him as a loud mechanical hum filled the room, signaling that the core was about to activate. Desperation fueled Julian's movements. He dove toward the panel, but Zara was faster. With a swift motion, she stepped in front of him, blocking his way. Her eyes were filled with cold, calculating malice. "I knew you would try something like this," she said, raising a hand to stop him. "But you're too late. The system is already running. You can't stop it now." Julian's mind raced. His instincts told him that if he didn't stop her now, everything would be lost. Humanity would be at the mercy of Zara's twisted vision of the future, a future where immortality came at the cost of freedom and individual choice, a future where she would control every living thing. But just as he reached out for the control panel, the unexpected happened. A blinding flash of light filled the room. Julian shielded his eyes, his heart racing. What was happening? When the light faded, he saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was Lara. "I've got you covered," she said, stepping into the room with a determined look on her face. In her hands was a small device, something that looked like a portable EMP generator. "Lara, what are you doing?" Julian asked, his voice filled with both confusion and relief. "You think I was just going to sit back and let you two handle everything?" Lara said, her voice fierce. "No, I've been tracking Zara's operations for months. I knew this was coming. I just needed the right moment." Before Zara could react, Lara activated the EMP device. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the device sent out a pulse, sending shockwaves through the building's electrical systems. The lights flickered, the control panel sparked, and the room filled with a deafening silence. Zara's eyes widened in disbelief. "No, you can't." But it was too late. The core was shut down. All of Zara's plans, her power, her control, everything she had worked for, was gone in an instant. For a moment, the world felt like it had stopped moving. Julian stood there, breathless, as he processed what had just happened. They had won. Against all odds, they had won. Zara stood frozen, her face contorted with fury and disbelief. "You think this is over?" she spat, her voice low and dangerous. "You may have stopped me today, Julian, but you'll never stop what's coming. There are always more like me. Always." Julian stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Maybe, but you don't control everything. Not anymore." With that, Zara took one last look at the destroyed panel before turning and storming out of the room, her steps echoing in the silence. She was gone, but Julian knew this wouldn't be the end of the battle. There would always be others like Zara, others who sought to control, to dominate. But they had won this round. And that, Julian thought, was enough for now. The building's alarms had stopped, the once ominous hum of the core had died down, and the room was now eerily quiet. Julian turned to Lara, who was catching her breath, her hands still gripping the EMP device. "Thank you," Julian said, his voice full of gratitude. "You saved us." Lara gave a small, relieved smile. "I didn't do it alone. We're in this together, and we'll continue to fight together. But for now, we've stopped her." Julian nodded. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of hope. They had won. The world was safe, for now. As Julian walked out of the facility, the early morning light bathed the city in a soft glow. It was a new day, and while there were still battles to be fought, Julian knew they had made a difference. And with that knowledge, he walked into the future with a renewed sense of purpose. The world had narrowly avoided catastrophe, but the battle was far from over. Julian, Lara, and their allies had made their stand, and though there were many challenges ahead, they had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity's will to fight for freedom and life would always prevail. What do you think, readers? Was this the end of Zara's reign, or do you think someone else is waiting in the wings? What would you do if you were Julian? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments below.